Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Gwent Police and Crime panel on Friday, the 11th of December at 2020. The meetings are currently taking place using Microsoft Teams platform and will be recorded and uploaded onto the Gwent Police and Crime panel website, except for discussion involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images and audio of those individuals present and or speaking at this meeting will be publicly available to all via the recording on the website at www.gwentpcp.org.uk. Press and public have been advised that they can contact in advance to join via audio telephone conference. My name is Jill Howells. I'm an independent member and chair of the panel. If I can just advise participants, if you could please mute your microphones when not contributing and then unmute the microphone when invited to speak. If anyone wishes to participate in the meeting, please select the hands up button on the toolbar. We had a few technical issues in our pre-meeting yesterday. Hopefully we won't be subject to that again. But if there is some freezing, just bear with us for 2 minutes and I'm sure it will all come through. So moving on to the agenda. The first item is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Jez Kirby. We have apologies from Councillor Mike Jeremiah. And we also have apologies from the PCC, Jeff Cuthbert.
Thank you very much. We will do a short roll call now. So I will work through, and if you could verbally acknowledge that you're on the meeting. So Councillor Clive Meredith, Blaenau Gwent County Borough Council.
Here.
Councillor Mrs Lisa Winnett, Blaenau Gwent.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Mrs Christine Forehead, Caerphilly County Borough Council. Okay. Councillor Colin Mann, Caerphilly County Borough Council.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Emma Rapier, Torvine County Borough Council. No. Councillor Peter Clark, Monmouthshire County Borough Council.
Here, Chairman.
Councillor Tony Eason, Monmouthshire County Council.
Present, Chair.
Councillor William Routley, Newport City Council. Thank you. Councillor Bill Routley is on the call, but he has a problem with his audio at the moment. And Councillor Mark Spencer, Newport City Council, he joined the meeting but has had to leave temporarily. And independent member, Mr Peter Nettle.
Here, Chair.
Thank you. And officers from the...
Excuse me, Chair. What about myself?
Oh, sorry. I had you down as apologies. Sorry. Councillor Jason.
That was last month, sorry. Yes, sorry. I'm here, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. And officers from the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner then. So we have Ms Larry Thomas, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner.
Good morning, all.
Darren Garwood-Pask from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Good morning, all. Here, Chair.
Thank you. And Sean Curley, Officer of Gwent Police and Crime Commissioner.
Yes, here, Chair.
I believe there are some additional members from your offices on today, are there? Could they briefly introduce themselves?
Morning, Jo Robinson here. I'm having issues with Outlook, but I hope to stay with you for the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo.
Morning, Joanne Regan here as well.
Thank you, Joanne.
Hi, Chair. Roger Guest. I'm here.
Thank you, Rodri. Okay.
Emma Lionel also here.
Thank you very much. Any other officers, or is that everybody? Lovely. Thanks for confirming that, Larry. Okay, moving on.
Do you have the Chief Constable here?
Oh, I am so sorry.
Don't worry, it's fine.
Chief Constable Kelly.
Don't worry, Chair, it's fine. I'm here, and from my office, there's Robin Fuller, who's going to help with the presentation, and ACC Jonathan Edwards, who's assisted greatly with the presentation. So just those two from my office.
Thank you very much. Apologies, I was reading through the membership list. Sorry about that. Okay, moving on then swiftly to declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest to record? No? Okay, moving on. Agenda item number 3, which is to approve and sign the minutes of the 25th of September 2020. So I will run through page by page, and we're looking at the minutes for accuracy, please. So if anybody has any issues, please pop your hand up and we'll keep an eye and we'll come to you for your comments. So starting with, Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, page 1, Chair. I did give my apologies last month, the one for this month, but I was getting married last meeting, so and I'm not on there, so
okay.
my apologies.
Thank you very much.
Chair, would it be appropriate for us to congratulate Jason and
Certainly can.
to note our congratulations as a committee?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Larry. Congratulations, Jason, from us all. Moving on, page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. 8. 9. 10. 10, page 10. Okay, so other than the attendees, thank you for that, Councillor Jordan. Can I ask then that somebody moves them for their accuracy?
Move that, Chair.
And
Seconded, Clive Meredith.
Thank you very much. Members, please can you comment that you agree on the accuracy of the minutes? Show of hands up, please.
I won't show, Chair, because I won at the meeting last one. So
Yeah.
Okay.
I got my video up at Chair. Fine.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's lovely. Thank you very much. If you could all take your hands down, we'll move on to the next agenda item. The next item on the agenda is the update by the Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent. So we'll hand over to O'Leary for that item. Thank you, O'Leary.
Thank you, and everyone, thank you for the opportunity to present this report to you today. I think it's only right that the report is there for you for information. Happy to take any questions, but I think it's only right that I start this update with recognising the exceptional circumstances that we all continue to face, as both the Gwent Police in relation to the delivery of its services, as well as the work of our office in supporting and holding the chief to account in relation to the areas of work. I think the real testament, I think, comes from the recent inspection we've had from HMIC, which recognised the exceptional efforts that Gwent Police have undertaken during the period, and have really continued to demonstrate truly exceptional areas of work. So I really think that it's only fair that we should pause and reflect on the exceptional efforts that continue to be made by our frontline officers, staff from Gwent Police, but also all of our public services in the current crisis. I think that the office, meanwhile, so and the other aspect I would want to raise, just in relation to both Gwent Police and the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, is that we continue to respond to the exceptional circumstances of the pandemic, providing a service and adapting our services on an on basis, but at the same time we continue with business as usual, and in particular I think really are focusing on our most vulnerable in our communities and making sure that we support victims of domestic abuse, domestic violence, people, children who may need our child protection services, and vulnerable adults as well. So it's a real challenging time, and I know that we have really welcomed, and the Police and Crime Commissioner in particular has welcomed the support of the Police and Crime Panel during all of this time. As I said, the report is there for you to read. The work has been ongoing in relation to the delivery of our Police and Crime Fund, supporting projects across Gwent, very much looking to respond to, in particular, the COVID challenges, being able to provide additional funding during this period through the Home Office for domestic abuse and sexual violence funding. I'm exceptionally proud of the support that our office has given to the VAUDA, the Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Board in Gwent around our White Ribbon campaign, which is just coming to a close this week, but really focusing on raising awareness about the importance of ending violence against everyone in our communities, but in particular in relation to women in our communities. We equally have really worked collectively with the Chief Constable in order to highlight Black History Month and hate crime awareness, and have held significant opportunities to engage with members in our communities, and have really benefited from being able to be in listening mode, listening to members of our communities who have particular experiences and who really want to work with us as public services to improve our services to all of our communities. I don't think I really want to draw any further attention to any aspects in the report, but I'm absolutely happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Larry, appreciate that. And I'm sure the panel will support me in commending the work of the officers and staff in these particularly exceptional and challenging times. Your report actually mentions the award ceremony, and I think it was excellent that you found the time, because it's not easy to put these things on, but I think it was very important that you made that time to go ahead with that and recognise the work, because you know, it's all well and good to say thank you afterwards, but things are ongoing, and who knows when this is going to come to an end. So I think that recognition was very important. The stories are incredible, and it was so well written. So, you know, thank you for making the time for putting that on and sharing that with us. Thank you very much. We have a few questions on the update. The first question is on, we'll go through page by page if that's easier for you, yes. And Larry, obviously, if you want to invite officers in to answer questions, that's fine. Page 11, then we talk about the COVID update. And I just wondered, has there been any difficulties in provision of resource to particular areas due to maybe isolation or absence of officers through injury due to sort of COVID demonstrations or anything like that? Has that affected the control room, whether frontline resources or other investigative work, purely because of COVID related factors?
If I can answer your question, but I'll obviously defer to the Chief if the Chief wants to make any particular observations in relation to operational matters. We've been really fortunate to have a representative. It's usually Sian Curley or Darren Garwood-Pask who attend the COVID Gold meetings every morning that have been held throughout the pandemic ever since March, in order to ensure our daily management of the COVID situation across the Gwent Force area. And so we are appraised on a daily level of the impact, both in relation to demand, incidents, the COVID related issues, but also issues in relation to demand more generally across the force. We have seen an exemplary response. Certainly in the first wave, sickness levels, impact on staff were actually at a minimum, and you know, the levels of sickness and the impact on the service were not greatly effective and were managed really effectively. I think what we're all recognising in this wave, for all public services and for the public as well, that these are ever more challenging times, and that this second wave is impacting on people when, you know, things have been very significant for a very long time. So I think we are seeing increased rates of cases across the force, but we are managing those really well. In relation to the force control room, you know, we're currently running our force control room on a three-site system, so that we're able to manage and make sure that we can mitigate if there were to be any illnesses on any one shift or any one cluster of staff. And I think that, you know, in relation to our sickness management, staff well-being management, we are doing everything we can. I really want to pay tribute to our occupational health department, who are fantastic in supporting people as they perhaps exhibit symptoms, need to appear for testing and tracing, and then self-isolation. But equally, you know, the opportunities that we have through agile working, through people being able to work in differing conditions and making sure that we adhere ourselves to all of the restrictions is really important. So I feel very confident that we are managing, and we have managed really well. I think COVID has provided those exceptional circumstances, and we will continue to do so. Pam, anything you want to add?
That's excellent.
Thank you, Eleri. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's been absolutely outstanding the way that we've worked as a team across the whole of Gwent Police. We've actually appointed a coordinator role in terms of trace and contact issues within force as well, so that we're scrutinising every role so that we protect the public, protect our staff, but of course, more importantly, make sure that we're able to serve our communities as well. It's basically which I think demonstrates the commitment of our staff. I'm actually telling people that they must take leave. Because people want to be in work supporting their shifts. And even if we have had many people off at any one time, and we're no different to any other organisation, we've obviously been impacted upon. But what we've done is moved our staff around so that if there have been more people off, say, for example, in Newport, people from other stations would support. But also where people have been self-isolating, what we've made sure is if they were supposed to be working nights on one day, they would continue to work nights to support their shift. So that they could take virtual statements, you know, from members of the public, so that our officers were then, who were fit and able to be out and about, that didn't need to self-isolate, were available to respond. So with brilliant staff, good coordination, great leadership from our local commanders, certainly our occupational health team have stepped up, but the commitment of our officers on the ground has been first class. And at a time when we've been under significant stress and strain, our proactivity and the amount of people that we've been arresting to keep communities safe has been higher than ever. And I think that is as a result of superb members of staff that we have who are absolutely dedicated to their communities. So, you know, I feel hugely privileged to lead this organisation at the moment because our staff are first class.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for the update. And again, you know, thank you doesn't seem by any way near enough, but you know, please pass on the thanks from the panel because the work that they're doing, and obviously the IT support in developing all the agile working, you know, it's absolutely huge. Councillor Eason has a question, and Councillor Mann. Councillor Eason.
Yeah, thank you. Back online. Yeah, so thank Eleri for the report, quite concise. But you did mention agile working. Are you satisfied from the position of the PCC that your Chief Constable is operating agile working, not at the expense of actual work on the streets?
Absolutely, can provide that assurance 100%. I think the decision making in relation to the deployment of our officers and staff is very much at the forefront, is providing that frontline service. So our absolute priority is providing the service to the people of Gwent and making sure that we have our frontline officers in our communities, engaging with our communities, and that's our officers and our CSOs, as well as our front of counter staff as well. So I think the Chief Constable and our office have a very clear criteria, and we will adhere to all of the absolute restrictions and regulations in relation to home working and agile working, and ensuring that where officers and staff are in our police stations, in our buildings, that we have social distancing measures and that we have absolutely the right environments for our officers and staff to work in. And that doesn't only include our police stations, but our vehicles, our training opportunities. So, you know, mandatory training needs to continue for police officers during this time. And again, our training department have made sure that where training is being delivered, that it's being delivered with social distancing and making sure that we're able to do those aspects. But Councillor Ethan, I can absolutely assure you that our frontline deployment has not been impacted in relation to our COVID or agile working. I just wanted Jill to come back. There were a couple of things I omitted to mention in my first response. So we've talked a lot about Gwent Police's continued delivery. What I haven't mentioned is that in all of this, not only have we continued to deliver, but we have also taken on the responsibility of enforcing the COVID regulations. And that aspect is no mean feat. And as we know, the regulations have been changing on a weekly basis at notice, and the absolute interface. And in fact, I was meeting with Welsh Government ministers yesterday. Our officers are on the street and in their communities and are often the first point of contact for the members of the public who want to understand what the changes and the regulations mean. And so trying to get and make sure that our officers are appraised of that changing environment at an ever increasing pace and quick time response is really important. And it would be wrong of me not to pay tribute equally to our joint legal service, who have been working absolutely 24/7 all the way through. I think sometimes we remember the officers who perhaps are in our communities, but our legal team have been absolutely exceptional in translating the changing guidance and making sure our officers who are in their communities and on our streets know what those changes need to be.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very good point raised. Councillor Mann, you wanted to come in on that question, I believe.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I know we've had verbal tributes from the Chief and the Deputy Commissioner, but I think as a panel we should record our thanks to the whole organisation for the way that they worked in the pandemic. I mean, a lady mentioned the changing rules. I think it must be a full-time job to keep up with the rules. I mean, it's bad enough for pubs and other organisations. Obviously, the police enforcing the rules, it's an even bigger challenge, and it's understandable sometimes that people get things wrong because it's been such a rapidly changing picture. But I think if we could record our thanks, that would be appropriate, Chair.
Certainly, very much so. Thank you. Okay, moving on to
page. Jill, can I come back? Thank you, Councillor Mann, and I really appreciate the thanks from the panel. I would just, in conclusion to those questions, though, just want to also bring to the panel's attention the leadership role which Gwent Police has played, predominantly led by the Chief Constable, but also through both the ACC John Edwards and ACC Ian Roberts in our coordination role of the Strategic Coordinating Group, working really proactively with our public service partners, but taking a real leadership role. So I think we haven't mentioned that, and it would be wrong of me not to do so. And I would really just want to conclude this by appealing to the public. I think that we know these have been exceptional. This has been an exceptional year, and this continues to be an exceptional and difficult year. And we recognise that during this run up to the Christmas festivities, that this really is a significantly challenging time, but really wanting to appeal to people to be careful, to follow the restrictions, to take care of you and your loved ones, and to really stay safe during this period.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sure every one of us echo those sentiments, so thank you for bringing them to our attention. Moving on then, page 13. So Councillor Winnett, she has a question on page 13 and page 14 for you. I'll hand over to Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do page 13 first. On 1.4, you mentioned about Halloween and the challenges officers faced. I felt in Blaen y Gwent, the officers felt an even bigger challenge regarding bonfire night. I wonder if you could update us on that, because we've had an update about Halloween, because I felt bonfire night was even more challenging for our officers. Thanks.
Apologies. Absolutely. I think, you know, we had to renew our efforts. Bonfire night and Halloween, you're quite right, Lisa. It's a mission of us not to have drawn our attention to bonfire night. Traditionally, really challenging points of the year in relation to policing. And this year we had to exercise, you know, very differing ways of working within our communities, trying to provide differing opportunities in relation to diversion, as well as trying to enforce those restrictions and keeping people safe during the Halloween period. I don't know if Chief Constable, you want to come in particular in relation to any of the policing activity.
Yes, thank you, Eleri. Thank you for raising that question. It was exceptionally challenging for our officers bonfire night, but not just our officers, all emergency services. And there is a joint emergency services group that Chief Constables, heads of the fire service across Wales, health service, ambulance service, all get together. We discuss every fortnight some of the emerging issues. And on behalf of the joint emergency services group, Gwent Police are pulling together the amount of incidents such as assaults against emergency workers, setting off of fireworks and the like towards ambulance staff, so that we can actually make sure that we're not just investigating and making sure that we're prosecuting, but picking up on any themes across Wales that we need to make sure we learn from in readiness for next year. But it was a very, very busy time for us. Our officers did really well. Our public in general did very well. But the culture in terms of assaults against emergency workers during that time was appalling. And as and when we're in a position to name and shame people through the courts, I would really appreciate your support in doing that with us, because it is absolutely disgraceful what some members of the community across Wales actually did during that time.
Thank you for that, Chief, and I do agree 100% with what you were saying. It was extremely challenging from what I was hearing off the ground for our officers. You know, bonfire was a lot more challenging than the Halloween period as well. But thank you ever so much. And our officers have been doing a fabulous job out there in challenging times. I'd like to ask the question on page 14 regarding Project Edwards. I've personally felt that the TV programme Crash Detectives has also been a positive effect as well on Project Edwards. Have you any stats or anything that shows that has had a positive impact as well on Project Edwards? Thanks.
In relation to the specifics, Lisa, I would either have to get back to you in terms of giving you the detail, but I think that Project Edward and the work of Crash Detectives has been exceptional in raising the issues around road traffic safety, road traffic collisions, and the role of the police. But I'm also really pleased that my office, or our office, has undertaken a piece of work this year in relation to road safety and road traffic policing, and that is currently being considered by the Chief Constable in relation to how can we best provide the service across Gwent in order to maintain safety on our roads. So I think it's a combination of the Project Edward, the work that we're doing to highlight real sensible use of our roads, and then work of our office in really looking at how we're currently delivering our services and how we can enhance those for the future. But I will come back to you with details in relation to the specific impact in your question.
Thank you ever so much. I felt it also helped to show Gwent Police in a very positive light. Crash Detectives was, and it was quite a powerful programme and in positive. So thank you for being involved in that. And then finally on 2.1, I'd like, this is not a question. I'd like to thank domestic abuse for the excellent work that they undertake with the victims, children and perpetrators, because not many organisations actually work with the perpetrators as well. And it's a fabulous establishment, and thank you for supporting it. That's all I've got to say for now. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, could I just come in? I know it wasn't a question, but it would be remiss of me not to thank Councillor Winnett for her comments, but also just to say we are absolutely delighted that we have been successful in a Home Office bid to build perpetrator services across Gwent, and we are going to be delivering that through with Phoenix. Phoenix will be the organisation delivering perpetrator services across Gwent, and we're absolutely delighted, because I think and I took this issue to our ethics committee, because if we are truly committed to ending domestic violence, the only way we're going to do that is by actually supporting and tackling perpetrators. So we need to make sure that we absolutely continue to support victims, but at the same time that we support and tackle and hold perpetrators to account.
Thank you very much. Moving on then, on page 15, Councillor Easton has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, good morning, Larry. It's to do with 2.1 on page 14, and it's the femicide census. I raised the question a couple of meetings ago about the trend of domestic abuse between all sexes. You're showing 149 deaths, which is far too many deaths. What is the level of information on male abuse, female to male abuse, and same-sex abuse? Are there statistics to show this? And since 2018, when we got 149 too many deaths of females, what was the trend in 2019? And has there been an increase in the last 9-10 months due to the pandemic, where families have been thrust together, which has possibly increased tensions within the homes that they live in? So really, I'd like to know, are there any statistics on female to male assaults and deaths, and any same-sex assaults and deaths, and the trend really on what's happened in the last 9 to 10 months? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your question, Councillor Eason. We will get back to you with the detail on the statistics and the cases. I wouldn't want to try to answer that and mislead the panel. But I think that by far the greatest level of violence is perpetrated towards women, but absolutely that does not discount that there is violence to all members of communities, of all genders, and within heterosexual and same-sex relationships. So we will endeavour to get you the statistics in relation to the detail. I think that both the PCC and the Chief Constable have been absolutely committed ever since the commencement of the pandemic to raise concerns about the impact of isolation and being restricted to home on people's well-being, welfare, but in particular for those facing domestic abuse, domestic violence and coercion. So we have, at the very beginning of the pandemic, we certainly saw reporting levels decreasing, but that trend has changed, and we have, through, I think, a real collective effort of all public services, really seen a re-establishment, I think, of reporting in relation to domestic abuse and domestic violence back to sort of ordinary levels of reporting. That being said, I think all public services are anticipating that when we really do re-establish more sort of ordinary ways of working, that we will see an increase in people reporting abuse that they may have been experiencing during this time. I don't know, Chief Constable, whether you would want to add anything in particular.
No, thank you, Chair. But I know Councillor Spencer's not come back, but earlier on in your submission, you mentioned roadworks and road safety and crashes. So I don't know whether the chair would be prepared to ask the question that Councillor Spencer wanted to ask, which relates to the comments you were making, and that was to do with the Southern Distributor Road in Newport.
I can certainly ask the question. I thought as it had been partly addressed, but
I thought partly, but not fully, but not the specifics.
Has the Police and Crime Commissioner been asked to provide additional resources to Gwent Police to address areas with high instances of road traffic accidents? For example, the Southern Distributor Road in Newport.
Hillary's frozen.
Okay, shall we?
Hillary's frozen, I think.
I can come in if it assists, Chair.
Oh, thank you, Chief.
Yes, so there have been an increase in the number of road deaths and also road incidents in the last year. What we have done is really looked at a problem profile of that. We have put extra resources, but it's also a partnership approach in terms of how we manage some of the highways in that area. So what the best thing I think we should do is provide you with a written response, Chair, around what we are doing in terms of proactive policing in that area, and also the partnership working and lobbying that we're doing with highways and Welsh Government to make sure that the roads themselves are and the infrastructure is safe, and not just the policing responses there to pick up the pieces afterwards. So we'll put a very brief report in showing the proactive work that we're doing and the partnership work that we're doing. And we understand that the public have also been asking many questions as well. And we've been answering those on an individual basis and also being proactive in the media in relation to those concerns.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chief. I notice I've got Rodriguez and Jason, Councillor Jordan, that'd like to make a comment. Rodri, can I invite you first?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. It was just to offer some reassurance to Councillor Eason around the White Ribbon Day content. Obviously, White Ribbon Day itself is aimed at stopping violence by men against women, but we've also done lots of male-focused work as well. We've supported the local support group Mars. We've utilised male survivor feedback into our campaigns. We published male focused comms around Men's Day, which isn't in this report because it happened after this report was written. And I think it's important to note with the 149 campaign we did, it was about educating people that we wouldn't normally engage with. Newport County took part and were really and did a really great job. The manager was on the telly with his white ribbon on. All the players wore T-shirts, and they tweeted some content out afterwards through the PL Kicks promotion that we partly fund. And this was a core aspect of what we were trying to do. No, it wasn't just about doing the challenge. They actually spoke to the young people who were attending, and in this case, it was all male, and explained the issues and why it's important to take a stand, but also, you know, if are experiencing it, encouraging people to report. So this just gave us, it gave us a cut through that we wouldn't have got any other way. And I'd also say we've done an awful lot, both the OPCC and Gwent Police, since the start of the year in particular, around domestic abuse, and that's covered a wide variety of different things as well. So we've done generic campaigns like the Don't Suffer in Silence and Read Between the Lines campaigns, but we've also done one specifically aimed at elderly people. And going forward, we're looking at one for next year around honour-based violence and things like that. So it is about trying to tackle as many, to reach as many different people as possible, and explain, as the Chief and the Commissioner have been really strong on this, particularly in their television and radio interviews, that it's not tolerated and we want people to come forward. So I just wanted to offer that reassurance to Councillor Eason.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jordan, did you want to come in with a final point on this?
Yeah, cheers, Chair. We not the last week in September, but the meeting before that, we had a long discussion for about 3 hours or 4 hours, and it went over the time. And one of the questions was I was asking of the breakdown of the numbers of domestic violence and domestic abuse against women, men against women, women against men. But it just seems like now nothing's been progressed then since the last meeting before July, when we asked, because you were going to put those questions in writing, and you were to the chief counsel and to Jeff as well about it as well. But just like nothing's ever progressed further than that.
Right, those questions were raised and we had the report. So I'll look back at that and look for any gaps and look to address those issues. Thanks.
Right, okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Lovely.
Okay, moving on. Okay, page 16. Lovely to see the Community Hero Award virtual ceremony that will be going on. Is there any way that any panel members interested would be able to access that? If there is, if that could be shared with the panel, that's just a comment really. But good luck with that, and I hope it runs as well as the Gwent policeman did. Page 17 then, priority 4. There's 6 incredible projects there looking at targeting ASB, and they're obviously projects who are receiving the funding, and it would be nice to see how effective the projects are over the next 6 months, and whether you'd be able to bring a report back at some point in time that shows us how effective they've been and how are they impacting the areas in which those schemes operate. Are we seeing a reduction in ASB, or are we seeing those individuals re-engaged? Are they engaging with the projects, and to turn up once and then never come back? Yes, it's an engagement, but it's that continued engagement or that diversion from ASB. So I wondered if there's something around there that could be brought back to us in a future meeting, please.
Certainly happy to do so, and I'm happy to do that in relation to impact, both in relation to the individuals accessing the service, the community, and also the benefit for our officers, and in relation to some of the work we do collectively with those services, which I think has been a real partnership, especially during this COVID period. Excellent, thank you. Page 19 then, you've talked about the board assurance framework, and it sounds really interesting, and I just wonder, again, not necessarily for today, but could a note be dropped to us as a for information item, just to explain a bit more how it works and the content of it? That would be okay. Lovely. Thank you very much. Absolutely. And perhaps we could also add it onto an agenda of the performance subgroup, because I think it aligns, the board assurance probably aligns really closely with the work around the performance subgroup, and happy to provide a briefing for the whole panel, but also a written briefing for the whole panel, but also any additional information to the performance subgroup. Lovely, thank you. Councillor Jason Jordan, and then Sean Cady would like to come in on this matter, I believe. Yeah, so not on this matter, Chair, but we missed a question for Councillor Revley because he haven't got no microphone. Could I ask his question for him, or? I have messaged him on the chat to ask if he would like it to be asked. Has he mentioned back at all, or no? So we've got to the end of this agenda item for him to respond back to us. No problem. Okay, thank you. Sean Kelly.
Yeah, just on the board assurance framework, just to reassure you, we spoke about it at our joint audit committee meeting yesterday, and they will receive it and a report at the March meeting. So I think it would be useful to perhaps put on the following agenda for yourselves, and we'll be able to give a full update then when they've had a chance to look at the final version, if that's okay with you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sean. Okay, moving on, agenda item 20, page 20. Councillor Jordan, you had a question there? Yeah, thanks, Chair. I know Olivia sort of touched on a bit about the force control room. How was the well-being of the staff in the force control room being prioritised during the COVID-19 pandemic, please? Again, I will defer to the chief to talk about the absolute detail, but I think the well-being of our staff across Gwent Police has been at the forefront of all of our actions during the COVID period, but recognising for our force control room that there are very particular pressures and strains. And in fact, I was talking to the Chief Constable this morning, recognising that as the pressures on our public services become even more acute
during this period, then we really do need to recognise that those people who are answering the force, who are answering our 999s, our 101s, who are at that absolute critical interface, are at the are performing an invaluable service. So our support for them has been absolutely absolutely continuous. Chief, do you want to outline that, please?
Yes, Jason. So as you know, we've split the force control room over 3 sites because we couldn't afford, for one room for all of our control room staff and for them all to go down with the virus. What that has meant is that we've had small groups and working together, which has been really, really helpful during a very busy period. Obviously, during the very hot months of the summer, right through to now, the difficult months ahead of us with the winter. What we've also tried to do, which I think is really important, is we have people in the force control room who are also vulnerable due to their own health. So we've actually been able to section them into smaller rooms again, so that we look after their health, because we cannot actually afford for them to go off sick. What we've also done at times is actually had people working from home, being able to answer 101 calls and deploy from their computers at their home address in order to keep the service going. And what I'm very proud of, Jason, is that we've had supervision meetings with all members of staff, and with staff workshops over the last few months. The feedback that we've had through Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary has been that our well-being has actually been noted. Our approach to well-being has actually been noted in a national document this week. So Gwent Police was actually named in a national document in relation to a thematic inspection as having exceptionally good well-being plans in place. So, again, through that family feel that we have here at Gwent Police, supporting people, but also trying to keep people safe whilst keeping the communities, our response to the communities running, I think we've done the best that we could have in a very difficult circumstance.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you very much. There's a question that Councillor Routley raised, as you just saw. It's partly been asked by Councillor Jordan, but I'll raise the question for a response. Obviously, unfortunately, Councillor Routley isn't able to provide any clarification or any supplementary to the question, but I'm sure other panel members will raise them if they have any concerns. So the question is, in your report, you mentioned the impact of the death of George Floyd in the USA upon the BAME communities. Could you explain how trust in the UK police has been impacted by reported cases of perceived prejudice? Thank you.
Thank you, Jill, and thank you, Councillor Routley. I think it's a really important question, and I'm pleased that it has been asked, and I'm pleased that that even though Councillor Routley, you were unable to ask it directly. There is no doubt that the events that we all witnessed in the United States in relation to the death of George were absolutely shocking and provided a salutary opportunity to consider the appropriate approach to policing our communities. And I think that it has provided us with an opportunity, I think, to reflect and to really consider, I think, the great strides we've made in the United Kingdom and here in Gwent in particular, but also how much more work we have got to do in relation to supporting our diverse communities. I think in relation to trust in our policing, I think it both raised significant questions about our approach to policing, but it provided us with an opportunity to reinforce and to reassure people that our scrutiny, our professionalism, our values are at the heart of how we undertake our policing role here in Gwent. I think it is undeniable that if you look at some of the statistics in relation to criminal justice in particular, that members of our Black minority ethnic communities are still disproportionately overrepresented in our criminal justice system. And therefore, it it does provide us with impetus for us to really make sure that our ambition, our plans, and our delivery on both on a strategic level, but also on a day-to-day level, are where they need to be. And it's for that reason that the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable have been really proactive in engaging with members of our communities across Gwent, in reaching out and wanting to ensure that we listen, that we hear, and that we provide an opportunity for our communities to engage directly with us. All the way through the pandemic, we have had a group meeting with officers on a weekly basis in relation to ensuring that our delivery of our COVID enforcement wasn't disproportionately affecting any of our communities. But I certainly know, and across our criminal justice system, in fact, yesterday at Criminal Justice Wales, the Criminal Justice Board for Wales, we had an hour-long session on disproportionality in the criminal justice system. That work is being led by our Chief Constable and the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for South Wales. And we are working tirelessly to ensure that we can provide that assurance that we absolutely have trust in our policing, that our policing is a model of consent, and that absolutely the importance of safeguarding our communities is at the forefront of everything we do.
Thank you. That's just an amazing response. Thank you very much for covering all the work and everything that's going on around that area. You know, what we see in the press and that the bits and pieces we see are just scratching the top of the incredible amount of work that goes on and underneath. And nothing gets achieved within a couple of days. Things take time. It takes time to move on, doesn't it? And the fact that things are changing is incredible. So thank you all for your work on that. The next question then, moving on. Page 21, Councillor Mann has a question on page 21.
Thank you, Chair. It touches really on the discussion we just had. I read on 510 that the Commissioner and the team took part in the unconscious bias training. Going back to the previous discussion, there have unfortunately been some high-profile situations in Britain with the Met Police in particular, where it appears that people have been sort of subject to racial profiling. And I did wonder whether that sort of training has been extended in particular to frontline officers, because that is where, you know, anyone who represents an organisation, that whole organisation is represented by the person who actually interacts with the public. And if one officer gets this wrong, that's the whole organisation getting it wrong as far as that person is concerned. So really that training, if it hasn't been done, I think it's very important that it should be actually carried out with our frontline officers.
Absolutely, Councillor Mann, and just to assure you that the training our office did was part of the training that was being rolled out right across Gwent Police. And I know the Chief wants to come in, but the commitment both to gender equality in particular and the unconscious bias training in relation to all aspects of equality and inclusion are aspects that we are totally committed to delivering, and training and awareness raising is an important part. And one of the aspects that we're currently working on is our strategic equality plan and the delivery plans in relation to our strategic equality plan. And I will be leading a workshop next week with our Assistant Chief Constable with heads of department from across the force and the OPCC to really focus on what we need to be doing at every part of the organisation in order to drive equality, accessibility and inclusion. But people's approach, people's attitudes and people's behaviour across the organisation, no matter where they sit, whether it's in finance, procurement or on the front line in our control room, is absolute. We need people to breathe and to live the values of Gwent Police in relation to equality and inclusion.
Thank you, Lady.
Okay, thanks very much, Lady.
Sorry, I think the chief wants to come in.
If I may, it's a really good question. Every single officer in Gwent Police has received unconscious bias training. Every police staff member is due to receive unconscious bias training. Absolutely essential. It's a part of us challenging culture and thinking as professionals within the organisation. And just to reassure you, Councillor Mann, in the last year, we have reshaped the entire organisation. Sergeant, inspector, right through to chief officer level, we've reshaped and had new people in positions. Also our head of people services, also our head of communications. So every level in the organisation, we've reviewed and remodelled. As a part of those promotion processes and interviews, unconscious bias has been tested, because we need leaders to understand and have conversations and reflect with people around unconscious bias. So the leadership approach here at Gwent Police is very much about understanding unconscious bias within the organisation.
Thanks, Chief. Could I say, Chair, that I'm very pleased with that answer, and especially the latter part of it, where it is actually included within the appointment process, because if people are slipping through the net and climbing up through the organisation in seniority, if they don't have the right attitudes, that just reinforces the problem, well, throughout, doesn't it? Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. So moving on to our final question on the update, it's to Councillor Winnett on page 21, 5.9. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I find it quite concerning regarding the uptake for the Commissioner's Facebook page with the stats that have been provided us for that period. You know, as many of you know, I run the crime prevention, Evervac Valley Crime Prevention Facebook page. You know, and we only cover in a valley with the Commissioners covering Gwent. And I know I've raised this before, but I'm still finding the stats really low. Like, for example, we have been in limbo, one because of COVID, and you know, with the crime prevention panels at the moment in limbo. And during that same time period, we only put up 10 posts. We still hit almost 28,000. We reached almost 28,000 people, where the Commissioner's office put up 55 posts and only reached 37. And the same again with the followers, where the Commissioner's covering the whole of Gwent and has 2,302 followers, where we're just covering the valley and we have 1,218. And I'm wondering what the Commissioner's office is doing to improve the uptake and making it more appeasing to people that want to follow the Commissioner's page, because I do find the stats that you've given is extremely low when you're covering such a large area compared to what we are as well as a crime prevention panel. Thanks.
Absolutely. Our focus on our communications is a real priority for us, Lisa. And so, you know, I think it's really helpful for you to be asking those questions and for us to really be able to demonstrate that we respond, because absolutely trying to extend our reach is really important. One of the things I would say, though, is we have been through a development period for our website over the last 6 months, and that has had an impact on our way of monitoring and demonstrating the reach. So there's been a recalibration of statistics and of reach during that period, which is impacting. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be absolutely trying to extend our reach at every opportunity, and in particular through our Facebook page, and making sure that we complement. You know, I think sometimes it's more of a challenge for our office when, you know, you're competing with Gwent Police and Gwent Police's main channels, because those are the areas that the public are really interested in, quite rightly, and we don't want to detract from that. But absolutely, we need to be enhancing our opportunity, because I think going back to the previous conversation, and what I wanted to come back and talk to Colin Mann about was absolutely this is about providing training and making sure our officers and staff have the right attitudes in our communities. But the role of our office and the role of Gwent Police is also about making sure that when members of our communities feel they haven't had the right service, that they can get in touch with us and that they know how to get in touch with us. And our communication channels are a vital way of doing that. So we have to be continuously improving how we extend our offer to our community so they know how to get in touch with us if they need to raise a concern or provide us with any feedback. I can see that Rodri wants to come in. I'm sure he'll want to respond to the detail around the Facebook question.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. There's a couple of things to comment on. I'll do Facebook first. In terms of the statistics, they're obviously based on our channels, but an awful lot of the work we do is aimed at increasing the reach via cascading and piggybacking messages through other bodies. So we do an awful lot of work with the councils and a lot of our partners in terms of the commission services, third sector, and things like that. And I give you an easy example would be what we've just done with the 149 challenge. On our recorded stats at the moment, that'll lie at something like 50,000 impressions, but that doesn't factor in partners' statistics. So the Dragons and Newport County with the 149 challenge both did quite a few things on social media. Just them on their own will probably times our figure by 10. But that doesn't get recorded here. I think there's a couple of issues then as well around who's using the channels. We did an audit in the summer and looked at who's using our Facebook channel, who's using our Twitter channel, and I think it's important to factor in the entire marketing mix in this. Social media is really important, but we also know with the people who are following us, particularly on Twitter and Facebook, they are very invested in policing. So you do have that echo chamber kind of philosophy, and this is why I'm really keen on moving a lot of our content. It goes on our channels, but we also use it across other channels and with other organisations. That is why when we do the public engagement things, it's been different this year, obviously. But why we're out and about in communities is because we want to interact with different people. So that's a key part of it as well. But by definition, we always want the channel to grow, but our focus, is very much on utilising other partners and organisations to deliver our message. So it's not about the OPCC, it's about the message. And again, there's some prime examples there with how we did Staying for Gwent in the summer or Easter, where we deliberately didn't badge that as OPCC because and Gwent Police, because it wasn't about trying to drive numbers. It was about reach and interacting with people. And ultimately, Larry hits the nail on the head in terms of what's attractive. And this is why the cascading and working with partners is so important. Gwent Police have got the, they've got the exciting stuff. We are a corporate body, and that's why we try to work with groups and organisations. So we're not solely relying on our Facebook and our Twitter stats.
Thanks for that, Rodri. And like, for example, I know the good work that you do regarding, working with the partners and, like the subscription service as well with the emails. Like some of the things, one of those 10 posts that we put up was one of the challenges. So some of those stats of ours are actually yours. But when we've got this report going forward, seeing those stats, in front of us, it doesn't show the true picture then, the reflection of what's going on, because you've given us a small little snapshot then, which makes it look quite, people are not engaging with the commissioner, and it would be nice to see if we can get that reach and those stats up even further, because Facebook is a bit like Marmite. You either love it or hate it, because it's people abuse it, and and then there's the positives. But it'd be nice to see that we are getting those stats up, because I know last time we had the report, those stats were low again, and they were actually lower than our crime prevention panels. They were, and that's what's concerning when we're having these reports and we're seeing these low stats. I know Gwent Police's stats are going to be probably 100 times higher than the commissioners. They are, and especially when you put something up about the dog section. But you know, it'd be nice to see that engagement with people on the social media challenges. Thank you on that.
Chair, can I quickly come back? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, it's only a quick couple of points in terms of the police reach. Yeah, I mean their core audience is 50 times ours, and you know we utilise it sporadically when we need to, because obviously Gwent Police's reach is brilliant. In terms of the overall growth, it is a lower growth in this period of 3 months or 2.5 months, whatever it is. I'd be you're looking at 3 to 5%. So 1% is not great, but then the actual Facebook one's gone up 7.5%. So you could actually make an argument that Twitter is underperformed and Facebook has overperformed in terms of this period. There is a bit of damn lies and statistics going on with that. And I take your point about, actually, I will look at how we do this for future ones, because obviously we used to report very heavily, and before when I initially started, on other like similar forces and things like that, and I stopped doing that because I didn't want to baffle you with I didn't want to give you tons and tons of statistics and try and give you an inaccurate narrative, but I will look at how we can probably highlight some almost what's the best performing content from the last 3 months or something like that, so you can actually see, although growth has only been a couple of percent, actually we've done 5 different things here, and just those on their own is 100,000 people or something. So yeah, I'll look at that going forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rodri.
To discuss that. Okay, so that concludes the questions on the update for the Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent. So thank you very much, Ileri and Chief for stepping in with answers on those. Moving on then to probably the most significant item on the agenda today, the presentation of operational context and requirements for the finance strategy 2021-22 to 2025-26. So I'll hand over to the Chief Constable to enlighten us on the requirements for the forthcoming year.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair. So we'll just get the presentation up on the screen. You will be pleased to know that, albeit you've got a lot of slides here, I'll obviously spend more time on some more so than others. And I'll break at certain junctures just so that people can ask questions along the way. But just for you to understand how I'm going to approach the presentation, that John Edwards, who is also online, has kindly really worked hard in putting this together for me. I'm just going to bring some context really to what it feels like to be policing at the moment, and with some of the challenges that we've had over the last year. Obviously keen really to make sure that we reflect on what we've achieved over the last year since the last budget bid. And then of course chat around what some of our successes have been. Because although this has been a really dreadful year in terms of the health crisis, from a performance point of view for Gwent Police, I'm very proud of what we've achieved this year. And of course, I'm just going to share with you then some of our challenges over the years ahead, not just the next financial year, but the years ahead, and what I'm trying to do to make sure that we have the appropriate resource, the appropriate leadership direction and vision for the force, but also that we have a budget for us to be able to deliver the best service that we can for our public. All of that, of course, within the context of fully appreciating the situation in all of our communities at the moment. Pre-COVID, it was hard enough in terms of, some of the poverty that's within our communities. But of course, with the economic challenges that we now face here in Gwent and across the UK, without question, there's some tough years ahead. So all of what I discussed today really understands the situation for our communities at the moment. So just a little bit about our background then. So as many of you would know, certainly since 2009, we've been working hard to save money. We saw austerity landing very heavily. And of course, during that time, we've seen a significant increase in crime, the complexity of crime, and of course, the different approach that we have to take to investigate crime, with much of our crime now being linked to technology. And as you know, since 2009, 2010, we as Gwent Police alone have already saved £51 million. That is an awful lot of money for a small organisation needing to deliver 24/7 a service that the community expects us to respond to, especially in relation to emergencies. As you know, across the country and indeed here at Gwent, we've seen an increase in serious organised crime. We've really had to tailor our resource to understand, risk assess and deal with vulnerability. And I'm very proud of the work that we've done, and I'll share some of our performance improvements around that. I think it's worth mentioning that we have one of the youngest workforces in the UK. So we're in the top 5 in terms of police forces that have, if you like, the youngest in terms of service. So as we've been recruiting people with, without policing experience. And what I do know over the years ahead is that although we are increasing in terms of our recruitment, what we will be losing is an awful lot of experience over the next 2 to 3 years. So whilst all of this is happening, what I'm keen to do is make sure that we have a workforce that is capable, and it's not just about numbers, but capable, that we have a resilient workforce to deal with things such as COVID, as well as business as usual, and that without question, we manage the well-being of our staff. There is no point in us increasing our establishment if we have lots of people off sick because the culture isn't right in this organisation. So we've been managing that very carefully and putting an awful lot of investment into really understanding the culture of Gwent Police at the moment. And to give you a feel for that, we've just reviewed our force values. And this isn't me reviewing the force values, this is our workforce reviewing our values and telling me what type of organisation they would be proud to be a part of. And our new force values are about being compassionate, caring, courageous, and that is because many of our officers and staff are very courageous in what they do every day. And to keep learning because we are a learning organisation, but also to be hugely proud of Gwent Police. And those are the values that our staff have come up with, that we are working with to build pride in Gwent. And of course, without question, it would be remiss of me to comment on the year that we've had and continue to have in terms of COVID. That has had an exceptional impact in terms of not just the way in which we've had to work differently with partners, but in terms of the demand that our officers, the increase in demand, and also the bravery that our officers have faced. So when we think of people going into homes at this moment in time, our officers go into people's homes to deal with domestic abuse, to deal with assaults, to deal with sudden deaths, putting their own lives at risk, and then go home to their own families. That is day-to-day policing that our officers and staff have done throughout the last year and continue to do. And I'm hugely proud. I could stand here and talk about the leadership, but I'm hugely proud of what our staff are doing as a part of the COVID crisis. And we're not just a part of the Strategic Coordination Group, we actually chair it. So we've actually been chairing the Strategic Coordination Group in terms of our response to COVID across the whole of Gwent. So police has just been leading with partners in this very difficult time. Moving on. During this time, of course, we've kept going. We've kept business moving as usual in terms of making sure that we maximise efficiency, but also respond to be able to meet some of the gaps in service. So we've been developing our safeguarding and prevention hubs with partners in our community. And without question, our focus needs to be on prevention over the coming years. I am determined that we are going to reduce crime in Gwent Police, in the policing area, and that we need to detect crime fiercely, especially crime that has a significant impact on our communities. We've worked really, really hard to make sure that we're improving efficiencies through introducing good systems, leaner systems in terms of processes, and of course in terms of the digital opportunities that we face. Despite all of this, we've seen it's been very difficult because financially, COVID, along with needing to improve the organisation, has placed further financial burdens on this organisation. You know, even though we've had some money back from the government, and I'll go into that further, COVID costs, and at a time when we're trying to increase our staff and of course make sure we improve our service, that funding is critical for us to be a sustainable organisation to serve our communities with pride. And of course, moving on, I think it's really important that you're aware, if we move on to the next slide, Robin, that although we are an organisation on our own, throughout the COVID crisis and as we're trying to develop policing, we are a part of a much bigger picture. So in Wales, we are working very closely together in terms of collaboration and opportunities to save money, invest and streamline systems such as our force control room system, such as single online home that I'll mention later on. But of course, we're also a part of UK policing. And although we talk about Wales during the COVID crisis, we as policing have worked very closely with all policing partners across the UK. So I have held meetings every single week with all chief constables across the UK so that we are working together, sharing resources, sharing ideas, sharing opportunities to collaborate on systems, not just during COVID, but in order for us to meet our Policing Vision 2025. And as you know, this is about making sure that the train tracks that we put down take us into the future, as well as trying to deal with the crisis that we're currently working in. And moving on to our next slide, of course, there are two things that are really important: that we understand the risks in our communities, that we understand what the policing crime plan is telling us, and that we make sure that we actually robustly target what hurts our communities most. And as you'll see here from our control strategy, child sexual exploitation, modern day slavery, human trafficking, domestic abuse, stalking and harassment. These are all issues that 10 years ago we wouldn't have been chatting about. But also right in the middle of that chart, you will see, and I am absolutely delighted with the way that we've tackled organised crime this year. We have been praised by so many agencies, the National Crime Agency, the Home Office, and many others in terms of not just what we're doing, but how we're doing it in terms of tackling organised crime with partners here in Gwent. And of course, you will see county lines there as well. When we look at the prevent agenda, speaks for itself. And we've many times spoken to you as a panel in terms of cybercrime, violent crime, sex offender management and hate crime. But right in the middle of that prevent chart, you'll see protest and policing of events. That is a real issue for us here at Gwent Police. Every single weekend during the COVID crisis, we have had a protest somewhere in this force. Whether that be against what we're doing in terms of COVID, in terms of government. We've had protests in terms of Welsh language, obviously the Black Lives Matters protests, and all of that has resulted in a huge amount of resources being available. They are not just resources that we can roll out onto the streets. These are people who are highly trained and have to be in a position to act proportionately in order to allow protests to take place, but also to make sure that people protest peacefully and, of course, within the COVID crisis, in line with government regulations. All of this is what we need to have in place to allow us to be fit for purpose for the future. Without it, the reputation of the service collapses, and of course, public confidence collapses in terms of public confidence in Gwent Police. Moving on, and I'll break in a few slides just to see if anybody would like to comment. And if people could kindly perhaps comment by putting their hands up, and then at a suitable time, I'll stop and obviously bring people in. I think it's really important that we talk about where we were last year and who would have thought what type of year we would have had, where we were last year in terms of our budget bid, and what we've done as a result of some of those financial investments. So as you know, forgive me, as you know, we are really working hard to reduce crime. Reducing crime is all about good investigations. It is all about victim and witness support, and it is about tackling offenders. So we have our integrated offender management programme, which is about tackling offenders, and we're really looking forward to the perpetrator programme landing so that we can reduce crime further and educate offenders. What we've done in the last year as a result of some of the financial investment that we've had to put into policing is that, as you know, we have seen an increase in violent crime, not only in Gwent Police, but nationally. We've seen an increase in assaults against members of our communities. And unfortunately, we've seen an increase in assaults against police officers. 2 years ago, we only had 120 of our officers trained in Taser. Taser is, of course, allows us to have a proportionate response in tackling some of our serious offenders and people who approach policing with either a knife, a weapon, police officers with a knife or a weapon or anything else that could cause injury to themselves, the community, and of course our officers. I have been determined to make sure that our officers are equipped in order to respond to protect their communities and themselves. We've then moved on to 180 tasers. We currently have 322 people with taser in our organisation trained, and by the end of 2023, 450 people will be equipped with taser in Gwent Police. What that means is that I feel comfortable that along with our firearms response and along with some of our great training, that we're in a position to protect communities and our officers in a much safer way. All of this costs money. All of this means that if we do not equip officers properly, not only are communities at risk, but also my officers, and I'm not prepared to take that risk. We've invested heavily in Single Online Home. This is a national product, which means that when people engage with policing, it means that they're signposted through digital means. And what we're already seeing is this is saving people coming through our 101 system, and we're able to give advice on a digital platform. Of course, this doesn't mean that all of our accessibility is via digital means. Absolutely not. We're also, of course, making sure that our sexual assault referral centres are where they need to be. And this is a real challenge. And Larry in particular, along with ACC John Edwards and Ian Roberts, is doing some great work around this. These are areas that we cannot afford to get wrong in terms of supporting victims of sexual assault. But actually, they cost a lot of money as well. Development of victim hub services. I'm going to go into some of our improvements around victim satisfaction. But it is hugely important that we continue to make sure we give the best service to our victims of crime. Moving on, as many of you will know, and I'll go into some detail later on, we have been fortunate to have some government money, Home Office money, to allow us to increase our establishment. That over a 3-year period is about 165 officers for Gwent Police, although we're still not sure on the 3rd year in terms of how many that will look, how many officers that will be. It also is an uplift in terms of some of our police staff as well. But what I would say is that going forward beyond that 3 years, we need to start planning for how we're going to afford those extra officers, because it is exceptionally expensive in terms of training, giving them the equipment that they need. And of course, we don't know what the budget challenges are beyond the next 3 years. But I will go into what I know where we currently are, what those budget challenges are for us. I'm absolutely, as I've said, delighted around our organised crime group work, and I'll go into some detail around that in due course. But just to give you some reassurance around streamlining our estate strategy, as you know, our new headquarters the shell is built, and I'm really delighted to see that development taking place. If you saw our force control room at the moment, we have officers sitting there, members of staff sitting there with coats because it's not fit for purpose. It is freezing. It is not good enough for our staff. And as you know, when we move to our new headquarters, that will be a £1 million saving in terms of the running cost of that new headquarters. What we're also trying to do is that our custody unit in Newport is not fit for purpose. So we're desperately trying to invest in a custody build to make sure that we have a legacy here at Gwent Police, which is all about an estate that supports operational policing. Some of our other challenges around PEQF, so this is about our new officers coming in, are actually trained to degree standard. But what it also means is that it costs money. And those costs are not at the moment fully met. And we are here out of kilter with England in terms of apprenticeship levy being paid here in Wales. All of this, despite our challenges, costs money. And of course, what we are doing and what we're continuing to do is to look at adverse childhood experiences, early action together, trying to prevent crime. What we are trying to do is to make sure the children who are right in the middle of domestic abuse incidents at home are actually safeguarded through Operation Encompass, which means that officers will actually contact the school the morning after an incident has happened. So they put our children first. All of that costs and takes officer time, but is hugely important. Just before we go on to the next slide, I've got two hands up. Jason first and then Lisa.
Yep. Thanks, Pam. Can you tell me what the cost is of training an officer then, please, for a taser, please?
Generally, the equipment, I'll give you a breakdown, but generally at the moment it's about a week's training, so that's officer cost, Jason. The equipment itself, which is a taser, and I can run that down for you. Bring a breakdown for that. But even the cartridges for training are cost about 20 quid a throw. So what you're talking about is an abstraction and the equipment and then the refresher training. So I'm more than happy, Jason, to give you a breakdown of what those costs are.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Also as well, this PEQF, what is that? Does that mean they do the exam and they go back into frontline policing, or they become senior officers as well?
No, so PEQF really, and John Edwards is online and has put this together. John, you've led on PEQF, EQF for Wales. Do you want to summarise it quickly?
Yeah, essentially, PQF is the Police Educational Qualifications Framework, Jason. I think, importantly, there's two prongs to it, and that's why it's called the Police Constable Degree Apprenticeship, which is an apprenticeship programme that lasts 3 years. They have to have a level 3 qualification or equivalent experience to come on to get onto the degree, and then over that 3-year period, they do their probation. They do what exactly they used to do under the old system, but at the end of it, they get a degree level qualification. But also it's important that during the course of that 3 years, they get a lot of skills that they'll hold them in good stead for the longer term, problem solving skills, and academic training that would probably give them that better insight into the issues that they're going to be facing as a police constable. The degree holder entry program is a 2-year qualification for people who've already got degrees, but not necessarily police degrees. Therefore, it's giving them the practical policing skills alongside the academic and rigor that these days I think police officers require. So it's not about fast tracking. It's about giving them the level of academic underpinning that is, I suppose, commensurate with the profession, which is what policing is these days.
Thank you, John. So it's professionalising the service, Jason, and making sure that we have a standard across the UK, not just in Gwent. So this is a UK standard.
So they need to do that first then before they can actually apply them to be in the police force, or they can do that after when they've joined?
Yeah.
That is part of that is part of the program now. So years gone by, Jason, we'd have a 2-year probation. That probation has just been extended to 3 years. So essentially, it's the same process. They go into their first phase of training, the academic element, for 6 months. They then go and do their tutorship. So it's a very similar process to what we've always had under the old scheme. It's just that there's the academic underpinning and the qualification to go with it as part of your training as a probationer.
Right, okay. Brilliant.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, John. Councillor Winnet?
Thank you. It's a bit of cross-referencing with his mum. There's echo feedback at the moment. We're on about the funding now with operational uplift, and then further on in the report on page 8, report then on the finances, and for 21, 22 and 22-24, sorry, our reserves have a significant drop. It concerns me, and I know I brought this up as well previously. For example, if we have an April Jones incident, you know, that cost 8.5 million. And, you know, financially, it concerns me going forward because we need these extra officers. We needed operational uplift. You know, it's still not bringing us up to speed of what we had, say, over 10 years ago of officers. But financially as well, it's also concerning going forward because we've got the ongoing costs then with operational uplift. You know, reserves are going to be dropping dramatically. Or where do we stand if we do have a critical incident, you know, God forbid, like April Jones, for example, and the cost that cost the force.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you on that, ma'am.
I really appreciate your points there, Lisa. If it's okay with you, I'll comment on uplift and what that means for us a little bit later on. But you're spot on, really. So at the moment, and as we go through the presentation, you'll see the amount of money that we have to save next year, and how much we have to save by 2025. However, my concern is that our establishment on police officers now must stay. So we are not allowed, if that's the right word, to reduce our establishment on police officers, but I have to save money from somewhere. So that's why the collaboration work and also our work around efficiency is really important, because what I don't want is to have to reduce our number of police staff in order to meet our savings, because what it would mean is if we put in police officers into police staff roles, which defeats the whole object of making sure that our officers are out in our communities. So these are the challenges that I've got to face over the next 3 months, in line with some of the red lines that I have to work within as a result of uplift and other funding streams. Thank you, Lisa, very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
So if I move on, just to keep the presentation flowing, and then in as we go along, unless, Tony, you've got something that you'd like to raise at this moment.
Sorry, Keith, it's Darren here. I've lost the ability to put my hand up for some reason. Yeah. Did you just want me to touch base? Apologies, Councillor Eason, just on Lisa's other point about the reserves.
I wonder if it's worth leaving it until the end. Sorry to be, because I comment on reserves, if that's okay, Darren, and I'm just really keen that we give that the detail at the end that it deserves, if that's okay with yourself, my friend. Good. And Tony, would you like to come in at this juncture?
Yes, thank you, Chief. I lost the link a little while ago, so I didn't catch all the drift of financial and cybercrime. Are you going to develop that stronger later, or will you just touch on it briefly? And the second question is, are you intending to get involved in facial recognition technology? That hasn't come up yet, so perhaps they may come a bit later on your report. Thank you, Chief.
Just to be very clear, cyber and fraud are not going to feature heavily in this presentation. I know that we've had conversations previously, Tony. I'm happy to have further conversations with you. Just in relation to automatic facial recognition, it is on hold at the moment, albeit there will be elements of that technology that we will be exploring in Gwent Police. And it's listed as one of the themes that we're going to chat through with you as a panel in the new year. So at this juncture, we're on hold with it. We do have ambitions to use parts of it. And of course, we're keeping an eye on some of the judicial reviews and ongoing debates before we decide how we best take it forward. But that's almost a presentation in itself, Tony, because of the complexities of the work. But we don't want to fall behind either. So we'll certainly update you on those as time unfolds.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. So moving on then, if that's okay with everyone. I am absolutely overjoyed by the work that we've done around serious organised crime this year. In the last 5 years, we have never taken so many serious organised crime criminals off the streets. We are now at the peak of our game in terms of seizing criminal assets, financial assets, and locking people up who are causing crime. And over the COVID crisis, I hope that you've seen, and a big thank you to our local press here, our South Wales Argus, Caerphilly Observer, Wales Online, and I'm sure I've missed some, but they have been helping us name and shame the people that we have been able to put before the court and get some really heavy sentences on. Now, this is just one example in terms of Operation Phonetic, working with the National Crime Agency. This is just one operation, seizing £276,000 amount of property, 329k in cash seized. In 1 month alone, we seized over £100,000 in cash from criminal assets, multiple kilos of drugs, and generally across the board there, we arrested, we've got 30 people who've been arrested who are due to go to trial still in connection with this case. And so far, 37 years of sentencing has been given to people involved in this criminal group. And I could go through many similar examples. Operation Solar, where we've had Class A drug supply seizures in the Newport city centre. Operation Glendara, where we've had a number of warrants executed and multi-kilo heroin, amounts of heroin actually taken off the streets linked to organised crime groups nationally. Operation Pupus, multi-kilo dealing of subjects of cocaine, heroin and cannabis, 20, 30 arrests at a time. All of this within our own force area. Operation Firgrove, Operation Beachway, 11 arrests made with 9 people currently on remand awaiting trial, £100,000 worth of cash seized. Operation Divide, a gang that we've arrested who were linked to county lines and other violence across the area. Operation Pine Bank, linked to county lines work that we've been doing. Unbelievable proactivity through some phenomenal work. We reduce the budget of Gwent Police at our peril. Because if we are not careful, if we lose sight of what's important to our communities and keeping them safe, we're unable to deliver this work. This work takes time. This work means that we have surveillance operations running, that we have to build up our evidence, because we cannot afford to put people before a court without our evidence being in place. And I am hugely proud that at a time when this organisation has been under great pressure with the coronavirus, that we have arrested more people than ever before. Our cells have been full because we have been proactive in our approach. And rather than issuing fixed penalty notices for COVID to people who are driving vehicles without insurance and without a licence, we've just seized their vehicles because we're not prepared for people to come into this force area and commit crime. I'll just move on to the next 2 slides and then I'll bring people in who might have their hand up. What I'm really proud of is that our performance is starting to be recognised nationally. So our joint inspection in terms of child protection, and this is joint partnership inspection, which was a partnership inspection of Newport, came out as a good for Gwent Police. We were seen to be leading some of the initiatives around child protection work. Child protection is what we've invested in since last year as a result of the money from the precept that we've had. We have fewer vacancies in child protection and in our detective roles this year in comparison to last year. And as a result of that, the performance is starting to speak for itself. We cannot afford to have gaps in areas which demand specialists. And specialists in these areas, again, are trained to a high standard and it costs money. I've already mentioned, and Darren, Hilary and Shana are on the line, and they were present at our debrief from HMIC, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, and we were all so proud to hear of the response from the Inspectorate in terms of not what we said that we've done, but what our partners have said Gwent Police has done, what our own staff have said about what Gwent Police has done during this time. And even though that judgment was not graded, I am delighted that we are noted for good practice in the national report. We have our peel inspection due to take place at the end of 2021. And I can tell you now that I am preparing for this because I want our communities to see this improvement and I want to see our HMIC to see the improvements across the whole of Gwent Police. I think public confidence is linked to good performance. And I'll share later on in this presentation what some of our public are currently saying about Gwent Police. We've submitted our force management statement, and I would really welcome some time to go through our force management statement with the panel. It shows our gaps, it shows what our demands are, it shows what our resource implications need to be, and it also shows what some of our funding challenges are. And I'll mention that later on in this presentation. Moving on to the next slide, before I bring people in. The next slide is in terms of demand. If we can move on. Thank you, Robin. We've got good little worker behind the scenes here helping me. I just wanted to share with you, as panel members who've supported Gwent Police and a huge amount over the last year, but over the last few years as well, what our staff deal with on a day-to-day level, and it cannot all be captured in a chart. When we actually look at what comes into our control room a day, every single day, this is what Gwent Police deals with. 237 909 calls, 748 101 calls. We on average arrest 25 people a day, but it's generally more than that. 500 incidents are recorded that we generally need to report to. 156 crimes are reported every day. 30 ASB incidents. Investigate missing people 12 a day on average. We deal with 43 domestic incidents a day. And we deal with 29 incidents linked to mental health, which is why we've invested in mental health coordinators and also social workers within our control room to help us try and reduce this demand, but also actually try and signpost people to the right agency in the beginning. And if we look at the middle of that slide, in terms of ongoing demand, 76 vulnerable adults a day are dealt with. When we're looking at MAPA and registered sex offenders, we deal with 811 here at Gwent. 811 sex offenders and violent offenders have been managed despite coronavirus. We get on with it at Gwent Police. We look at 200 child protection strategy discussions. And of course, we support domestic abuse constantly through the work that we're doing. It is absolutely critical that panel members and our community understand the work that we do every single day. And MAPA is multi-agency public protection arrangements. They are national arrangements that actually 15 years ago I was a part of writing, which is how we actually manage sex and violent offenders in our community. They're a statutory guidance in terms of how we do that. I really want people to understand this because, in all honesty, during the COVID crisis, when extra demand has been placed against police officers, and when only yesterday, Frank Atherton, in terms of health in Wales, praised Gwent Police for the enforcement that we've been doing over the last month. So coronavirus is on top of all of this demand. And, over the last few weeks, the last month, we've issued 52 fixed penalty notices in relation to COVID. We are working jointly on the pavement with local authorities in relation to COVID, not with any extra money. We're just getting on with it. And I am absolutely delighted with not just what we've done, but how we've done it and how we've kept business moving. Okay, I'm just going to bring some people in now who might have their hands up. Bear with me. So we've got Mark who's got his hand up. Mark, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you. Firstly, I'd just like to say thank you for all the hard work that's been put in. I think you said over the last 5 years on organised crime and the other slides that you've shown. On the organised crime side of things, I know a lot of work has been done, especially the last 6 months, and I'd just like to ask for guarantees for this work will carry on at the rate it is at the moment and keep doing what we're doing. Thank you very much.
What I will say is that whilst I'm the Chief Constable here, this will absolutely be a priority. I'm not prepared for serious organised crime to flourish in our communities. But of course, what I need is a budget to allow me to deliver that. But without question, whilst I'm here, this will without question be a priority for us. I absolutely love seeing on the front pages of the papers people who we've locked up. And, you know, I cannot thank the media enough. People run them down. They've really helped us explain what we're doing over the last year. And I'm really proud of that, whether that be social media and or the printed press. People have really worked with us and acknowledged the work that we're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next slide. I'm mindful of everyone's time and I'm very passionate about these things, so I tend to go on a bit. So I'll try and keep to time. I just want you to understand how we're managing performance at the moment. We don't just monitor performance through a monthly meeting, we monitor performance on a daily basis, because this is about understanding risk and understanding what's affecting our communities every day. Our ambition is, in linking in with national ambition, that we want to reduce crime by 20% in the next 5 years. I actually think if we invest, and the word invest is critical here, in prevention, we will reduce crime. And if we reduce crime, it means that children feel safe in our communities, elderly people feel safe in our communities, and businesses will be comfortable investing here in Gwent, which is what we really want. Safe communities allow communities to thrive. And I'm really proud to say this year, and it's not as a result of COVID, because this isn't reflected across the country. During the early parts of COVID, there were some significant decreases in crime, but they've plateaued out in most areas. But this year, we have seen a fall in crime by 9.6%. That isn't just coincidence. It's a result of our investment in prevention, targeting repeat offenders, and investigating crimes robustly. And in reality, what that means for the last year is there are 5,582 fewer victims of crime. And I really want us to celebrate this, because this means that our communities are becoming safer. And that comes with a hell of a lot of hard work, not just from our officers on the ground, but by some of the commissioning services that our Commissioner's Office and the Commissioner leads on. In addition to actually reducing crime in the last year, we've actually detected more crime, or we've had positive outcomes, whether that be cautions and or signposting people. We've also seen an increase by 3.9%. So that's an increase that we've detected more than 1,000 crimes this year in comparison to last year. Sorry, we've detected more than 1,000, yes. One other thing which I think is critical for you to see is that our increase in public confidence is actually starting to be seen. We've actually commissioned an independent company to speak to members of our community every quarter so that we benchmark what people are thinking about our community. And at the moment, we can say that 77% of people questioned felt confident in Gwent Police. Now, I think that's okay, but I'm determined that we're going to improve that over the year ahead, because I want people to not just see what we're doing, but to feel that confidence in our communities. And it's really hard against a backdrop where nationally policing is so frequently criticised for what they're doing. It's so easy to criticise policing, but actually we're building public confidence in Gwent Police. Our victim satisfaction over the last 12 months has improved. And I'll go through a bit of detail here because it'll save us time later on. And I know the panel have been really interested in this. So in the last year, 82% of people are satisfied with the service as a whole provided by Gwent Police. Now that's not bad. That's not bad. 71% feel that they were satisfied with being kept up to date with things. I want us to improve on that, and we are improving on that. 78% were pleased with the outcome. And listen to this, everyone. 94% of people were satisfied with the way that they were treated by the service. Now, this is hard graft to get our communities working with us. And I want this performance to keep improving over the year ahead. I am absolutely delighted with this. And this is through hard work of our officers on the front line. If we move on to the next slide, which I think really explains some of this in detail. We've reduced crime, we've got fewer crime, we've reduced some of our positive outcomes, which I think is really important for us to demonstrate. This is an improving picture as a result of investment in policing. If we move on to the next slide. Serious violence, which is what we're all frightened of in our communities. I do not want to see serious violence increasing in Gwent Police. I want people to be safe in terms of serious violence. And what I'm delighted to say is the serious violence has fallen by 9.3% compared to the previous year. That's 93 fewer crimes. But we've also improved our detection rate, our outcome rate, by 4% in this area. This doesn't happen by coincidence. If we move on to the next slide. Now, this is a little bit more concerning, but actually there is some really positives here as well. 29.2 fewer rapes reported to Gwent Police in the last year. Our outcomes rates are improving, so we are detecting more rape and sexual assaults. What isn't on this slide is that we are in the top 2 nationally in terms of conviction rates for rape. So our conviction rates are at the top of the country in terms of how we deal with rape and sexual assault, which is why our sexual assault referral centres are so critical to this work. But my concern is, during the COVID crisis, that not just sexual assaults, but also domestic abuse has been underreported. And that is why we have been at the forefront in making sure that in terms of our media releases, and I have fronted up many of these, I've wanted to ensure that people report crime, especially the crime that impacts on the individual, and especially the crime that happens in people's homes. And if we look at domestic abuse on the next slide, you will see that there's been an increase in domestic abuse, and this was a question asked earlier, by 1.7%. That's 82 more crimes reported this year. I'm pleased about that. I think domestic abuse is one of the most underreported crimes in our society. It is vulgar. And what you are seeing is that we're also making sure that the positive outcomes in terms of our intervention have increased by 1.8% compared to this time last year. Across nearly all areas around performance, and we've still got a long way to go, we have seen an improvement in performance this year. And I cannot thank the leadership in the organisation for the work that they're doing to communicate and to really bring ambition to being a big part of the teamwork in keeping our communities safe. And we'll move on quickly through the next 2 slides, because we've already talked about victim satisfaction and I've already talked about public confidence. But just in terms of public confidence, we're now trying to get into the granular detail about which communities have the most confidence in us or the least amount of confidence in us. And so I'm really hoping that as we benchmark some of this, I'll be able to share with the panel some of the communities that we need to target, because perhaps public confidence isn't where we want it to be. Moving on to officer absence, which I know the panel has taken a great deal of interest in over recent years. If people are unhappy in work, if we do not concentrate on well-being, if we do not equip our staff with the right knowledge and experience to perform their role, what you see is an increase in absence because people can't cope with it. And can I tell you, policing is hard work. Working shifts, pouring down rain, taking 999 calls every day, dealing with sex offenders, child protection referrals. It's not easy business. This isn't easy business. And so our staff deserve a huge amount of applause publicly. Policing is criticised far too much in my view, and without question, I will always stand by our staff here at Gwent Police, and they know it. And within the last 2 years, I'm delighted to say that officer absence has been reduced by half. And also, we have driven down staff absence by half in the last 2 years. So what this means is that we have more people in work, engaged in what we're trying to do, and able to respond and deliver a service to our communities. We've worked hard in this area because a motivated workforce means that we lock more people up who are causing havoc in our communities. And I'll move on to the next slide in relation to COVID. And I've already mentioned that throughout the COVID experience, because it's been one hell of an experience for our communities, it's just been awful for them. And we've wanted policing to be a part of everything that needs to take place to solve problems and to perhaps, support our communities in the best way. So we have, as I've already said, led the strategic coordination group. We've made sure that we've been in a position to respond in terms of digital policing and, as we've already mentioned, agile working. We've made sure that in terms of our response with partners and our communication with partners that it's been robust. We've used our technology to best effect. And also we've been a part of that partnership communication in sharing the restrictions with staff. And I think Councillor Mann mentioned earlier, the restrictions have changed so many times that what that has meant for us is that we have had to make sure that our officers are aware of those restrictions in order to help inform communities. And it's been a really difficult balancing act because there we are helping and informing communities, but at the same time enforcing in communities, but at the same time wanting our communities to have confidence to report crime to us. And I hope that we've got the balance right. We don't know yet, but I hope that we've got the balance right in terms of public confidence in Gwent Police and our proportionate response. We have led throughout this crisis on cybercrime, domestic abuse. I have led personally on some of those areas. And very often the media have come to us for guidance in terms of what the policing response is. And we have fronted some of the media response to provide a narrative about the impact in policing to our communities. But of course, it's cost us money. We already know that £665,000 to date has been ring-fenced for COVID expenditure, but that's just going up and up. Sometimes our officer overtime, sometimes of our abstraction from the workforce into partnership working, all costs. And of course, that endless need to make sure that we look after our staff with PPE, which has cost money as well. We're nearly there, everyone, but just around looking at the next slide, and I'm not going through everything that's on the slide to save time, but of course we've got some future challenges ahead of us. We've got some significant challenges around Brexit. We're already being asked today for mutual aid support because of some of the Brexit challenges. Without question, we've seen an increase in public disorder. And of course, as we prepare for the next few months, we know that we've seen flooding this year, we've seen significant protest, we've seen a health crisis, and we've had to keep business moving. But we could have some further winter challenges ahead. Snow, flooding will no doubt present us with further challenges over the next few months. And just at the back of our minds, something which is really positive for our area, the International Conference Centre. But with that comes further policing demands. So something that brings money into our communities, that allows us to see our community, absolutely leading through this conference centre, places further challenges on policing. So where we have VIPs attending that conference centre, it means that policing has to be there. Where we see that conference centre being used, we sometimes see it being a place where protest, and therefore it presents further policing challenges. And just moving on to some of our slides, and perhaps sharing with you, again, some positives, but some caution that Lisa's already mentioned. I just want to share with you that in 2012, this is Operation Uplift figures, in 2012, Gwent Police had 1,402 police officers. Due to austerity in 2016, that went down to 1,144. That's the impact that we've seen in frontline policing. And I'm not even going to the police staff side of things. And I'm not undermining what police staff do, because they take on an extra role in policing, which is second to none. The 10th of December this year, we will have increased our establishment to 1,343. So still not up to what we had in 2012, despite demand growing. But by March 2022, as a result of Operation Uplift, but also as a result of some of our commissioners' work in supporting collaboration, and that collaboration realising some money for us, we will have 1,400 officers in the force. So we will only then be anywhere near the establishment that we had in 2012. My concern is what Lisa's just mentioned, that as we get our establishment up, what does the financial challenge look for us over the next 3 years due to the impact of COVID? But also, what I don't want us to do is to stop arresting those serious organised criminals as a result of us reducing our workforce, as we've had to do over previous years. So Operation Uplift brings with us some significant challenges. I've talked about prevention over the last few minutes, and I am determined that if we're going to reduce crime, we have to invest in prevention. And at the moment, we are disadvantaged in Gwent, because despite Welsh Government giving us money for community support officers, as a force, we don't pay for as many community support officers as other forces in Wales. So we're at a disadvantage because they prevent, they problem solve, they gather intelligence to allow us to detect and prevent crime. And I really, really need to invest in prevention this year, which is why the budget bid that I go through is so robust. I think we need extra community support officers this year so that we really focus on prevention. And 10 officers, extra officers, that are not covered by any precept bid, that we need to cover over the next 5 years is a part of some of my ambition. When we talk about the next slide and collaboration, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but our collaboration work is second to none. We're leading on some of these areas, we're implementing on some of these areas, but also, as I present this bid to you today and explain some context, the comprehensive spending review and the detail of that is not yet aligned to where we're going to be in policing. I don't know what it actually means for us in Gwent Police at the moment. And some of the national programmes that are listed here, for example, the Emergency Services Network, some of our programmes linked to air support and aviation, some of our programmes linked to scientific support, that is our crime scene investigation work and our submission of DNA and samples. We do not know what funding we're going to have in relation to some of those. So there are lots of unknowns here, but we are, and I hope this slide presents to you, collaborating and pushing so that we bring efficiency through collaboration, but also improve effectiveness. Our next slide just shows what our force management statement has identified. And so these are some of our gaps, but also some of the work that we're doing. So you can see there some of the work that we're doing to really improve based on some of the analysis that we've done, which has shown some of our gaps in our force management statement. If we move on to the next slide. We have already approved some investments for this year because we cannot afford for our performance to reduce. So we've already agreed a safeguarding model. We've already increased the supervision model so that we can deal with crisis effectively. We've already increased the capacity, as you know, of our detective model, and in particular around domestic abuse and domestic abuse matters. And I'm determined to improve our service to victims, which again is going to cost money. And the analysis of all of this is certainly within the detail that we're able to present with Darren. I absolutely need to invest in prevention. So we don't buy crime, prevention, volume crime reduction. I am determined to reduce crime in the Gwent area. And to do that, we need to invest in prevention, not just respond to crime, which is what we were able to do with the limited resources that we've had over the years. Just responsive policing doesn't work. We have to prevent crime from happening. And if we move on to the next slide, you'll see some further investment decisions around the 10 CSOs that we really need to get into our communities. I'm really determined that some of our custody work needs to be improved. And that, as you know, we're really passionate around our area support units. They do a lot of our proactive work. So we're really pulling some of those in so that we can make sure that we are responsive as a force and not just working in silos within our communities. The value for money profiles that Darren, I know, has shared with you over recent months. Onto the next slide. But what I'm trying to do, everyone, is to have a longer term view in terms of our budget. So making sure that our state is fit for purpose, that our performance is where it needs to be, and that our performance is recognised nationally, because Gwent Police is a brilliant organisation that is not valued enough as far as I'm concerned. And what I'm trying to do is really improve those efficiencies through collaboration so that we can reinvest into the front line. And going on to the next slide, the reality is this. When I mention the budget on the next slide, if our budget, if the CSR detail isn't there and is not what we need it to be, and if our precept isn't where I need it to be, then I'm going to have to take some services away. And these are not just words, it's the honesty in terms of what I'm able to deliver as the Chief Constable of this area in these communities. And some of that work will have to come from prevention. So we will have to take perhaps some money away from some areas in order to be able to deliver the best service that we can around emergency response to our communities. So the performance that I've just gone through, if our budget isn't there, the reality is that we're going to have to reduce in some of the areas that are allowing that performance to improve. And these are the decisions that if the budget isn't where it needs to be, and there's difficult challenges across all agencies, and I get that. But what we do is put people at risk if we're not in a position to prevent crime. And I'm not prepared to see Gwent communities struggling when it comes to community safety and detecting crime. And, moving on to some of the ongoing risks, in terms of reviews, I would need to reduce in some areas if, for example, some of our funding isn't where it needs to be. And, where we are now in a position of really knowing what our risks are, I'm still trying to save money in terms of overtime. I'm still trying to see where we are in terms of the funding of community support officers going forward. I'm still trying to lobby for the apprenticeship funding for Wales. But also, we know that during austerity, some people are not going to be able to pay their council tax. And what this means is a potential impact on the budget, which means that we won't be able to deliver the best service that we can. And then just finally, as I move on to the final slide, and of course we'll bring Darren in, I just want to say it very clearly in terms of where we are, albeit the detail isn't there from the comprehensive spending review at the moment. For me to be able to deliver a service in Gwent Police 24/7, responding to all the demand that I've mentioned to you today, and maintaining performance and improving performance, I need a budget of 145,960,000. That is not investing in anything. that is just reshaping the organisation, that is not asking for extra money to do anything significant, just for me to sustain where we are now and continue improving performance, I need that budget. What I do know, because we cannot just look at a budget in a 1 year period, what I do know is that as it stands, I'm going to need to save something like £7.1 million by 2025. How are we going to do that and keep our communities safe? We already know, just based on an assumed precept of 6.82, we're already going to need to save £3 million. This year, we're still, and that includes the borrowing. We've never had to borrow before as Gwent Police in recent years. We're going to need to borrow in order to deliver an estate strategy that's fit for purpose. Our reserves are decreasing by the year because our reserves have been there in order to fulfill our estate strategy. We are identifying savings and we will continue to do that. But we still have a financial deficit of 2.529 million. And why I suppose the reason why it is really important that I've taken the time today to go through some of this performance with you is, although some of the finances are unknown, even with the bare facts, it's going to be really difficult to provide a service unless the precept isn't where it needs to be. So my budget bid is and will continue to be for 6.99%. And that is for us to deliver a service, but also just to increase by 10 community support officers. And even with that increase, those support officers won't be funded entirely by the precept. It'll be Gwent Police funding that over the next 5 years. What I need to do is, of course, make sure that there is a reserve to deal with things such as the April Jones case that Lisa's mentioned. I need to be able to deal with things such as counter-terrorism incidents, and all within making sure that we have an establishment that actually meets the demand and can cope with the demand that comes in every day. And so, colleagues, I know these are very difficult times for our communities, and I know that communities are really struggling at the moment. But as per last year, my bid is for a 6.99% precept in order for me to deliver the best service and the best performance that I can for our communities. I'm sure there will be many, many questions, and I'm sure that Darren will also add to this presentation. But I just want to place with you the great work that we've done through some of the financial investment that we've done over the years. And what I do not want is for performance in Gwent Police to go backwards when it really needs to be progressing at a time when serious organised crime and violence is increasing in our areas and across the country. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd for your time today. I'm really, really grateful. But please just think carefully in January in terms of the precept and in terms of the quality of service that we want to provide through policing to our communities in this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. I mean, that's an incredible story. It's not a story, it's an incredible picture that you've painted for us today. And that typical daily demand image brings home the reality of the pressure on the force. To see that it's really clear and it's really precise around the sort of pressures that you're facing. I mean, clearly the ongoing work and improvement that's been evident in the force needs to carry on, but it also needs that continued investment, and we echo that from your presentation. The reduction of 9.6% achieved through the improved prevention and the detection relies on that continued investment. You've got reducing absence rates, which is fantastic, and the improvement in victim support. That's a trend that we really appreciate seeing, because that was an area where we'd seen drop in, and through that support, hopefully, if victims feel encouraged and supported, we will have improved prevention and we'll have improved detection that they feel they're able to carry on through the process of taking offenders to court. But as you've said, unfortunately, all of this amazing work is recognised, but unfortunately all public services require investment, and it is a time, as you've said, of austerity and economic hardship. The impact and awareness of the force, I think, has increased no end this year through COVID. And I guess there's nothing any of us want to thank COVID for, but actually the importance of our public services, obviously the NHS first and foremost, but in terms of the emergency services in supporting the NHS, etc., that's come through incredibly, and I think public have a different awareness of that. So I would urge members, you've had this presentation today. The Chief has made a very compelling case, for the funding, but members need to satisfy themselves that when we come to discuss this in January, it's a very important meeting in January. We're not determining today. I think if we were, we probably would say, yes, Pam, have the money, have more. But we have to put that in perspective, and Darren will, at the January meeting, give us a case, a very clear case that he will present for us. And we need to have, as members, a clear understanding about how we discuss that veto, how we discuss that budget, and that any form of veto, any form of change, any form of adjustment, what impact that would actually have on the force, and how the performance that's been achieved would be affected by that. We have a couple of questions. If I could ask that we make these brief and that we then move on to the other agenda items. We will obviously have the chance to put questions back to the Commissioner, to the Chief Constable and to the office at the January meeting. So if we could just quickly run through them. So I'll go as they're on my list. Councillor Meredith.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Constable, for that. Very informative. May I say I fully endorse money is being spent on an increase in CPOs. On your public confidence you showed earlier on, you will notice that Blaenau Gwent had 73% satisfaction on the Skype, which is lowest. And it has been noted in Blaenau Gwent that there's always been a movement of CPOs from one neighbourhood to another, and this has caused a disconnect with members of the community as the rapport built up by these officers is sometimes lost and policing suffers. So I fully endorse that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Meredith. Moving on, Councillor Winnett.
Thank you, Chair. It's more feedback for Mum. It is. One, thank you for the report. It was a really good, powerful report. But also something when we were talking about officer well-being, when you were speaking about that. A friend of mine's a police officer. I've got quite a few friends in the force, but he was assaulted in Monmouthshire. When he was being arrested, and something he said to me was that you telephoned him, you did. And he was over the moon that you took the time to personally phone him to see how he was, to say, here's my number. If there's any problems, give me a ring. When you've got an extremely busy schedule, it made him feel not like a number, that a person, a valued member of the team as well. And I thought I'd share that feedback for you, because I doubt he would have said it to you, mind you, but how much he said to me, how much he really appreciated it, that you on the phone, he said you were so passionate and you cared so much as well about what had happened to him and his well-being. So I'd like to thank you, Ma'am, for what you were doing that other members of the panel might not be aware of, that you take the time to connect with every single officer and be there supporting them as well in your busy schedule. So thank you, Ma'am, on that.
Thank you, Lisa. I speak to every officer that's assaulted or member of staff. I ring them and just make sure that they're okay. And if there's anything we can do, I think it's really important that they know they've got my support and I value what they do.
And I think
thank you.
That goes a long way, and I think that's where you see the decrease in absence rates, because people feel valued, and I think that goes an incredibly long way. Thank you, Councillor Winnett. Councillor Mann.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Chief, for your presentation. Very comprehensive. As you say, we'll have a real discussion in January, but in the meantime, I just wondered, it may be useful, and Darren could probably do this, what is needed to maintain the service out of the precept that you're asking for, and what proportion is needed to actually improve it, because affordability, as we all know, is a huge issue. COVID has hit a lot of people very hard financially, so we've got to think about that. The other one was, I should have probably raised this before, but I missed to get my hand up. We were asked 2 or 3 years ago for extra funding to strengthen the detection side of things. Has that been reflected in some of the results that you actually gave us earlier? Yeah.
Absolutely. So that funding has gone into our detective units. We had many vacancies in the criminal investigation department. As a result of the funding that was agreed, we've now been able to fill some of those vacancies. So we've had police staff investigators as well as further detectives fulfilling those roles, which in turn means that we're able to detect more crime and bring more people to justice.
Okay, thanks. And a quick apology to everyone. I will have to leave to join another meeting before too long.
Thank you, Colin.
That's the good or bad news.
Always bad news. And final question on this matter then from Councillor Jordan.
Cheers, Chair. Thank you, Chief. It's very good report. You know, it just blew me away. I mean, I actually pulled off all the document. I actually read it through last night, and this one's for Darren, really. You know, this will test his patience now, or test whatever you do. Let's see. I put a comment in the chat. Would it be nice if the government would retract the savings back this year from the pandemic of the COVID-19? Do you mean, you know, they helped other people, they've helped businesses, they've helped everything else. I mean, I don't. We are, you know, we are the front. You are the front lines. I mean, you are looking. You're protecting people. Me personally, I would, you know, if the government was listening or watching these things, I mean, you know, it'd be nice to give a bit back to the police force as well. Do you mean? And hopefully they can try and do something.
It would. Thank you, Jason. I mean, the Chief did pick up in a presentation around the costs we've incurred as a service since the beginning of the year on COVID, touching 700k, getting 400k back for medical grade and other grade PPE and some of our lost income, but it still leaves a gap. You're absolutely right. You know, the big thing I was going to say around this is the ambiguity and the risk around funding, both national and local. So economic downturn, you can appreciate what the Chancellor is looking around to fund UK PLC, but you'll appreciate that government are very good at giving with one hand and taking away with the other. So as much as that ambiguity clears up until Christmas, provisional settlement should be with us next Thursday, which will crystallise a lot of our significant uncertainties around the government funding piece. As much as on the surface they will be investing in policing, we've been here before when actually it's not investing in policing, because on the other hand, there'll be a requirement for the service to deliver savings. Comprehensive spending review, which was ambiguous towards the service, has said £120 million worth of savings from the service next financial year. In Gwent, that's £1.2 million of additional savings. How that lands on us, we don't know. It could be blunt, that they just drop our grant by that much, or it could be less blunt and they give us some savings targets. But you're right. Wouldn't it be great if, even as a first step, we got all our COVID costs reimbursed, let alone then further savings pushed through onto the service? And I suppose, whilst I got the floor, there's a couple of points I just wanted to make, if I may. I think the Chief absolutely smashed the context, the unique context of this year around COVID, around society, around Black Lives Matter, and fantastic work we've been doing around performance. The risks of Brexit, what's going to happen with not just the financial ask, but the operational ask around that. Significant work on the estate strategy, etc. So I think there was all the themes I wanted captured were captured there. And I just want to pick up on Lisa's point around reserves. You'll appreciate that I have a legal duty to set aside sums that the Chief needs in the event of an April Jones, and I will never go anywhere near those. I'm not allowed to, and nor would I prudently do. So as much as reserves are going down, and they're all part of the rich tapestry of how we balance the books and run this wonderful organisation, I never go to a point at which I can't provide that contingency for the Chief and that set aside. But you'll appreciate when we're funding that estate, funding that investment in ICT that we're reaping the rewards for now, reserves go down. So the last point I want to make is I had a really good session with the finance subgroup this week. So that was Jill, Colin and Peter. And we went into quite a significant amount of detail around the the transparency around funding, around the transparency around expenditure, and the significant savings that the Chief has delivered and will continue to need to deliver. And there'll be another 2 meetings of that subgroup in early and mid-January, when some of the clarity, particularly national funding and local impact on precept, as you'll appreciate, we are absolutely aware of the affordability issue this year and the impact on collection rates and the impact on precept growth that does impact Welsh commissioners differently to English commissioners. There have already been governmental assurances to English commissioners about government stepping in and protecting some of that precept drop. We've not had that yet, but I'll be able to provide that to Jill, Colin and Peter as we move forward, so they'll be far more informed, and I'll be informing you globally as a panel as we move towards January. So thank you for that opportunity.
Excellent, thank you very much. And if I could just invite Elavi to provide her final comments on this matter.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Chief for a very compelling presentation, compelling oversight really in relation to the demands and the requirements of Gwent Police. And thank you to panel members for your support and for the acknowledgement of the real value and benefit that we get from the leadership of our Chief and of the delivery of our officers and staff. Just to build, I suppose, the context, the Chief provided her bid to the Police and Crime Commissioner on the 24th of November. The Police and Crime Commissioner's role and duty now is to scrutinise that bid before bringing it back to you in January. That is a process that we will now be undertaking with due diligence. The bid was the budget was presented to the Joint Audit Committee yesterday, so that's a really important part of the scrutiny process. And equally, the presentation today is an important part of our obligations to scrutinise, test, and ensure that when we bring the budget back in January, it is absolutely has been, and we really do, it has been tested. And that we do appreciate the support of the Finance Subcommittee. I think the case for the resource level that we need is compellingly made. The focus now is on how we fund it. So I don't think the question is whether we need the level of resource, it's how do we maximise the revenue and from what source, and then come back to determine what is the level of precept. As Darren mentioned, there are so many unknowns this year, and in fact I've taken a real sight from a comment made in the Joint Audit Committee yesterday, which said we always enter budget rounds not knowing certain factors, but the Joint Audit Committee, who are made up of independent financial and management representatives from our communities, said they have never known a year of such budget uncertainty. And that's the difficulty for the PCC and the Chief in bringing this forward. But I know absolutely that what we need to be driven by is the operational requirements, that we need to absolutely make sure that we continue to be able to provide our service during the COVID period, an unprecedented period. But we also need to make sure that we provide business as usual and an effective service. But the PCC's commitment in bringing this back to you in January will be to effectively try to balance the absolute requirements of the resources to deliver an effective service for our communities across Gwent, effectively safeguarding and protecting our communities, but most importantly, reducing crime, supporting victims, supporting members of our community, and tackling violence, abuse and exploitation. That is absolutely a priority. But the other priority for the PCC is affordability. And it's recognising that this, just as much as we need our public to endeavour to continue to deal with the difficult situation that COVID brings, to really follow the regulations and restrictions, but we also recognise the financial impact and difficulties for households across Gwent. And that will be at the forefront of the Commissioner's mind as he tests this budget and brings it back to you in January for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. An incredibly interesting and vital agenda item for us today. And, you know, it's taken us some time, but time that's needed to make sure that members have a full understanding of what we'll be discussing and the finance information that Darren will be bringing to the January meeting. So very much appreciate the officer's time in pulling that together and to the members' time in considering it today. Thank you very much. Conscious of time, I'm moving on to agenda item number 6. If I could invite Kath Thompson to update us on the Gwent Police and Crime Panel recorded complaints and conduct matters register and complaints procedure. Thank you, Kath.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, panel members. This report is the report we bring to the panel every year, and it records all the complaints received by the panel during the period November 2019 to November 2020. The report highlights the 3 complaints are attached as Appendix 1. 2 of those complaints have been resolved through informal resolution, and the 3rd complaint is ongoing. I would say, as there's no trends particularly has been identified, but the panel wanted to note that the complaints received appear to be because of some delays in responses and some administration of the complaints in the Commissioner's office. So in terms of the recommendations, the panel's asked to note the information provided in relation to the complaints, and also asking the Commissioner's office to ensure the complaints received are dealt with clearly and in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kath. Amy, would you like to come in on that one?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you to the panel for your report and for your work in oversight of complaints. Our focus, as we've just spent the last agenda item, has to be on providing effective services and continuous improvement, whether that's the Gwent Police or the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. It's really important that we encourage the public to raise any concerns, to provide us with feedback, and that includes complaints. And we must take complaints seriously, both through the Professional Standards Department of the Chief Constable and our office. Investigating our complaints has to be a key priority, and we have to get it right. So we acknowledge the issues that are raised in the report, and we provide our absolute assurance and commitment that we will continue to improve and respond effectively.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Did any panel members have any comments that they wish to raise? No? Okay. Could I have somebody move the report, please?
Move the report, Chair.
And seconded? Thank you very much. Thank you. Moving on to the next agenda item. Amendment to the Rules of Procedure and Panel Arrangements. Questions to the Police and Crime Commissioner. So if I could invite Kath Thompson once again to outline this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. As panel members will recall, back in December last year, we made a change to the panel arrangements to put a standing agenda item for questions to the Commissioner, and we set out a procedure to follow for those questions. So this report outlines what's happened in the past 12 months, because we agreed when we made the changes last year that we would review it after 12 months. And as you can see, I've outlined in 3.2 the number of questions we've had during this year. It's probably been impacted because of the March meeting was cancelled in terms of the number of questions. I think I've had some good feedback in terms of how members find the questions, they find it helpful. And it's just for members to note it, to ask if they're happy to continue and to allow questions to be submitted and added onto the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Kath. Any further comments on the report?
None from me, Chair. I just move the report.
Thank you.
Second it, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And just to echo that, you know, we certainly as a panel, I think we find it extremely helpful. It gives the Commissioner a little bit of notice where information needs to be gathered, and it allows us to potentially pick up on things that are not on the agenda. So very much appreciate you taking that forward. So that was moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next agenda item, Treasury Management Update Report, agenda item number 8. Aleri, might hand it over to yourself or Darren on this one?
I think I'll hand it straight over to Darren for that.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. And I will keep this brief. So this is the first report concerning the 2021 financial year. It was presented to the Joint Audit Committee yesterday, where they approved it for, or recommended for approval for the Commissioner. So intrinsically, it's on for information today. It's one of 3 reports: our Treasury Management Strategy, the mid-year report, and then the year-end report, and they all go through the Joint Audit Committee, etc. And I think the annual strategy is down in the papers for today. And in essence, it just talks about investments and borrowing. So investments at the end of September 2020, 45 million out on fixed rate, getting just short of half, or just over 0.5% of interest on those investments, and we'll recoup about 200k of investment income for that. We also have some variable rate investments out, totaling about £3 million, getting 0.2% and realising about 8k of investment income coming through. What I also usually write in these reports is any breaches to Treasury management practices, and there are no breaches at this stage. And we've talked earlier around the Chief's bid around borrowing. So essentially, in my time in the Commissioner's Office, and before that in the Office of the Chief Constable, we've not taken out any new borrowing. We had some old legacy borrowing. We paid it all off in the last couple of years. However, linking to the reserves piece, as we move into 22-23, committed funds that we've set aside for some of the capital strategies will be consumed, and we will be moving into a borrowing position, which is reflected in the medium-term financial plan. And it's intrinsically around, as the Chief has said, delivering a capital strategy that is fit for purpose for modern-day policing in Gwent that meets the public, the officers, professional best practice, and also the sustainability piece around the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So we have the 4 pillars of our estate strategy, which we are delivering through the borrowing portfolio. So in short, the report sort of confirms that our capital investment plans are affordable, sustainable, prudent, and meet all the statutory requirements for our Prudential Code and Treasury Management Code. And I'll pause there.
That has to be a record, Darren. I'm incredibly impressed. A lot of information, snappy was in there. Thank you very much.
Chair, that was a shock to the system there.
I'm impressed. See what can happen on Zoom. Okay. Councillor Winner, I know you had a question. I'm not sure if you've picked that up previously, because I know it was
I have, Chair.
Has that been addressed? Lovely.
Yeah, that's addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, I know you had a question you wish to raise, and I can see Councillor Jordan. Councillor Mann, would you like to take yours first?
Can I let Jason go first? I'm just sort of,
yes,
I'm just locking my brain back into this one, to be honest.
Councillor Jordan, you carry on.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. God, that was a quick move with a football then from 11 to Darren. You can have that one. I'm not discussing that one. Just a question, Darren, please. Could you explain further the rationale for providing loans to local authorities outside of the Gwent area? Because there are 5 different authorities which we borrowed money to. And what's the for the apparent limited rate and return as well, please?
Yes, so a number of local authorities are in borrowing positions. So we're not, but we're quite unusual. So they can go to a market. They're able to go to the market to borrow. We have surplus cash-backed funds within reserves at this point in time, and therefore we can lend to certain counterparties. Counterparties must meet a very high level of financial security for us, because the primary objective for when we're lending money to maximize our reserves, like you would if you had savings, you want to get your best return. But our number one priority is around the ability to get that money back to security and investment rather than the return. So we will go to AAA rated banks and building societies, local authorities because they're public bodies, etc., etc. So we'll put money out through our treasury management brokers if we have surplus funds at a particular time. So there's a difference between our income coming in, our expenditure going out. We'll have surplus funds for a period, and we'll put that out to the market to get the best rates. So those local authorities who have borrowed off us have come to us offering a rate at which we lend. Now you'll appreciate the rate at which I can lend money, or the rate of return I want, is directly related to the security of that investment. So I can go high risk and perhaps get a better rate of return, or lower risk and get a lesser rate of return. So because it's public money I'm investing, I'm duty bound to go with a higher security piece than a higher yield piece. That's where you see the return is quite, on the surface looks quite low. But if you think about the bank rate at the moment is 0.1%, and all the amounts we have out at the moment are getting 0.5%, I'm getting a better rate than the lowest bank rate. And you appreciate, because some of those loans have been up for some time, they were put out when the bank rate wasn't as low as it is now. But the internal benchmark I use is called the LIBOR rate, the London Interbank Offer Rate. Yeah. And that's running just shy of 3.5, but 0.3, I think it's 0.35% now. So I'm even getting higher than the London Interbank rate currently. That said, we went through this in some great detail yesterday at Joint Audit Committee, and I am looking at alternative avenues around maximising that rate, but still within the security of maintaining that when I put that capital out, I'm assured I'm going to get it back. So I must have a very low loan default rate. Does that help, Jason?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you.
It was just the way when I read it, I was thinking, oh gosh, they're not even in the Gwent area. They're all it's all wider field.
They do. You know, it's across the piece with the local authorities, and they're the ones who have offered us a really good rate that day, and we've accepted it.
No problem. Thanks.
Sorry, thank you very much, and hand it over to Councillor Mann. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's very mercenary, Darren. It's where you can get the best rate, basically.
you know, yeah. You've read through my bluster.
I mean, obviously, a lot of this has to be short term for the reasons that were mentioned earlier. The building program that we're undertaking, but there is some which. I'm trying to remember how much your maximum sort of length is. Probably 12 months, I think. But there are maybe other places that we can look, and possibly that's something we can explore in one of the subgroups. I think you know, there's I know my authority has put money via CCLA, for example, which. You know, which is bringing a reasonable rate of return. So, as I say, it is worth it. I mean, the attraction of local authorities is that, as far as I know, local authorities can't go bankrupt. So, and in the present situation, that is a big sort of advantage, isn't it?
You're absolutely spot on. So the Treasury Management Strategy has a portfolio of counterparties with various financial limits and various maturity dates. So I'll generally put up to £10 million out for no more than a year to UK banks that are AAA rated. Non-UK domicile banks, it'll be a £5 million limit, again for less than a year. And that's the same as building societies and money market funds. So I've got a group there, a maximum of 5 million for less than a year. Local authorities, higher amount, I'll put 15 million up for no longer than 2 years. And we also got the UK DMO, Debt Management Office, and I've got no limit on that, but it's under a year with a really poor rates. But the point you make, the strategy does allow me to put up to £5 million out into property fund, and CCLA I am engaged with, for up to 5 years. So I'll appreciate, and I've kept it at 5 million simply because my reserves are committed elsewhere in delivering capital strategy. So I don't want to tie stuff up into long-term investments when, you know, the capital strategy comes knocking on the door saying we need the funds. So you're absolutely right. Property fund, something we're engaged with and are looking to do. And again, it's a £5 million cap for up to 5 years at this point, because the important thing, you know, I talk about security of getting the loan back, and I talk about the yield. The other important bit is the liquidity. If I need to put my hands on cash very quickly, links back to reserves, links back to the April Jones conversation we've had. You know, touch wood, we're not in that boat, but the liquidity of cash is also very important for unforeseen circumstances. So yeah. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Dan. I didn't realise there are any AAA rated banks out there at the moment. not UK ones anyway. I saw one in Australia a while back. But so I realised that I didn't say what CCLA was. I don't know whether you. I mean, obviously a lot.
Yeah, we use them, churches, charities, local authorities. Yeah. So we're engaged with them. We've got I've had several meetings for them. Ironically, the last meeting before national lockdown on March the 16th this year was with CCLA. The next day we went into lockdown, and that was about to commence the portfolio of investment. So I'm linking back into them before Christmas.
Okay, thanks, Darren. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Colin.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much for your comments there. Okay, moving on to agenda item 9, the final item on our agenda, the forward work programme. So I'll hand back over to Kathleen Thompson on this one to update us.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to, as we've mentioned during the meeting, the next meeting is on the 29th of January. That will be the PCC budget requirement and council tax precept proposal. So obviously I will be emailing members to remind them how important it is for everyone to try and attend that meeting. The meeting after that, we've also added in the performance framework Q2 report to that agenda as well. We've on the 5th of March then we've added in the automatic facial recognition item that members had asked for previously, and we've moved the summer meeting to the 1st of July to accommodate the timelines for the performance framework reporting. So we'll have the final Q4 report in July and the annual report from the PCC as well. And what I'll do is there's a couple of things highlighted in the meeting today about information reports. So I'll amend the work programme accordingly to recognise those as well.
Thank you very much, Kath. Councillor Mann and Councillor Winnett, you both wanted to come in with comments. Councillor Mann first.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was trying to recall whether whether the panel as a whole has been updated as we discussed some while back on the estate strategy. I realise there is a group being set up now, but whether the whole panel has had a chance to catch up properly with the estate strategy.
December last year, we did the full presentation, Colin, absolutely right. There's dates being set now for the estate strategy reference group in January, which we've had the members for.
1st of February.
Is it brilliant? Brilliant. Thank you, Councillor Eason. Brilliant. Thank you. 1st of February, is it?
Yeah.
So I suggest we could bring something perhaps the March-June meeting to see what those findings are.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Sean, did you want to come in there?
It was just a reminder, really, of the obviously the PCC election takes place on the 6th of May. So we may want to reconsider some agenda items following the election. You know, we can pick it up again then, but just to flag that up.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Winnett?
Sean just shut some part of what I was going to say then. You beat me to it, Sean. Also, we haven't got on the diary either. It's a confirmation meeting that we'd be holding following the elections. And I don't know if you want to add that on to our forward work programme as well, Kath.
Sorry, Lisa. What I would do is we wouldn't add it on yet because we wouldn't have a date. So until we have the election results, we wouldn't know what we have to do with regard to that. So that would very much be added on after the election.
All right, thanks, Kath.
Very much. Okay, I can't see anybody else with their hands up. Okay.
Chair, one question that was asked on the messages by Councillor Mann, that powerful presentation by our mum, are we allowed to share it with our colleagues in the borough councils, you know, sending it to the other council members? It was asked further on up in the meeting chat when the presentation was taking place.
Thank you. Is that possible?
If you wouldn't mind if I just have a quick look through, and then by the end of today we'll send you a version that we're happy with. I just want to check a few things, but I see no problem with the bulk of it being shared. But I'll just review it and get back to you.
I think it would be good useful background information for our elected colleagues, really.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
I agree with Colin on that, because you know, members will ask, why is the precept going up? This is a good understanding for members because it was such a powerful PowerPoint and give a really good understanding. It was one of the best ones we had, you know, looking back on other ones that we had presented to us. It was really, really good PowerPoint. Thank you.
Is it going up, Lisa?
You mean it top down PowerPoints?
the PowerPoint I'm on about, but it is, you know, it was so powerful. It showed the demand on our services as well. So, you know, it's good for members to have that information as well when they are talking with the communities.
it was about, you know, the quality of the content, given the environment that we're in now and the situation and what the force is facing. It was incredibly powerful. So yes, if we can have a suitable version to distribute, that would be fantastic. Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end of this meeting. Thank you very much for your time and attendance at today's meeting. It's been very important topics to cover, particularly in light of January's meeting, which, as you know, confirmed by Kath, if members can ensure that they're available for the next January meeting, and obviously have the time, if they weren't in attendance today, to consider the information that's been sent out in readiness for that meeting. I'd like to echo the sentiments of the Deputy Commissioner in terms of follow the rules, take care, stay safe. I wish all the panel members, the officers, staff of Gwent Police, the Police and Crime Commissioner, you know, have a wonderful and safe Christmas. We look forward to seeing you all very much in January. And thank you all once again for your work this year. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Thank you.
Nadolig Lewin.
Happy Christmas,
everyone.
everyone.
Happy Christmas.
Bye.
Ta-ra.
Bye-bye.
Ta-ra.